This fellow was really ambitious. After thinking for a while, he fell asleep in a daze. Hei Shinjio fell asleep. The discipline hall master Zhuge, and the others were looking for her like crazy. After the discipline hall's manager Song understood what had happened, his heart was like a dog that had been bemoaned. He didn't know if the higher-ups had gone crazy, but they shouldn't have sent a little girl like Yun Chujio to the number 9 sword forging hall. Although there was no explicit rule, everyone knew that the sword forging hall did not accept girls. Wasn't this just looking for trouble? If it had been an ordinary female disciple, it would have been fine. Yun Chujio was not someone to be worried about. Now she had blown up all 8 doors of the sword forging hall and even went missing. It was really troublesome. However, where did this Yun Chujio run off to? Why didn't the identity jade plate respond? Could it be that she fled because she was afraid of punishment? That didn't make sense. There were people guarding the sect gate, and Yun Chujio's spiritual power was not high, so how could she escape? Yun Chujio slept until the sun was high in the sky. She stretched lazily, thinking that she was awesome. It had to be said that this guy's self-healing ability was very strong. There was nothing that could not be solved by a good night's sleep. This guy picked up the identity jade token and could not help but feel a little puzzled. Logically speaking, since she had caused such a big incident, the identity jade token should not be so quiet. Could it be that those people were in the wrong so they did not go to the discipline hall to complain? Even if those people did not complain, the north, south, east, and west should not have ignored her. Or perhaps her identity jade token was broken. The more Yun Chujio thought about it, the more she felt that this conclusion was reliable. Anyway, her identity jade token was broken, and it was not her problem. She could hide here and practice the sword technique she saw on the cliff. Therefore Hei Shinjio ate some simple food. After she left the house, she began to practice the sword technique she saw on the cliff in the courtyard. The more Yun Chujio practiced, the more she felt that this sword technique was really mysterious. Although it was not a complete set of sword technique, this half set of sword technique was enough for her to analyze and study. Once Hei Shinjio became focused, she was even afraid of herself. Because this fellow was obsessed with this sword technique, he had almost forgotten to eat and sleep, not to mention leaving this courtyard. Therefore, for 3 days in a row, the discipline hall searched the entire nameless sword sect, but they still could not find any trace of Yun Chujio. Almost everyone thought that Yun Chujio had fled because she was afraid of punishment. Elder One immediately suggested to Master Ouyang to issue a sect arrest warrant to arrest Yun Chujio in the entire northern continent. Master Ouyang found an excuse but didn't agree. He always felt that that little girl was extraordinarily bold. How could she flee because she was afraid of punishment just because she blew up 8 gates? This was not in line with her style of doing things. However, where did the little girl go? On the other side, Hei Shinjio collapsed on the ground due to the exhaustion of her spiritual energy and physical strength. She mumbled softly, "This sword technique is too mysterious. I'm such a smart person but I've only grasped the tip of it. However, it's also possible that I don't have enough spiritual energy so I can't grasp some of the mysteries. Forget it, I haven't gone out for a few days. Those people are probably going to die of anger. I'd better go out and make a public appearance." Thus Hei Shinjio ate something and went to the front yard. She wanted to open the door to go out, but she found that the door couldn't be opened. Hei Shinjio kicked, knocked and could not open the door. She gritted her teeth, took out the talisman and tried to blast the door open. Unfortunately, she found that the talisman could not be used. She tried to use the sound transmission talisman again, but it could not be used. It turned out that it was not her identity jade plate that was broken, but there was a barrier here. Hei Shinjio looked at the ridiculously sturdy door, and a sad thought arose in her heart. Could it be that she had suffered retribution because she blew up 8 doors? Yun Chujio stretched her neck and shouted a few times, but there was no reaction as expected. However, this guy was a little puzzled. Why didn't the people of the discipline hall search this place? She didn't notice anything unusual when she came in. It was obvious that it was useless to think about this now. It was better to think of a way to get out. Therefore, this fellow took out her omnipotent kitchen knife and prepared to chop down the main door. Unfortunately, before she could do so, the main door had disappeared without a trace. PN0V1 Yun Chujio. Fuck. How could he play like this? Just as the guy was still in a daze while holding the large kitchen knife, a few wisps of white mist drifted out from the abandoned crafting furnace and finally transformed into a sloppy old man. However, it was very faint, as if it was going to disappear at any moment. The old man saw Hei Shinjio frowning and said with disdain, "Why is it a girl? Can the nameless sword sect let girls forge swords now? It's really getting worse with each generation. No wonder no one has come in to forge swords for a long time. Yun Chujio was already holding her anger because she could not go out. Now that she heard the old man say this, she was even angrier. What's wrong with a girl? A girl eats your food and drinks your water. Let me out quickly. The old man snorted coldly. Girl, don't be stubborn. Let's not talk about other things. When it comes to forging swords, women are inferior to men. Whether it's beating the sword billet or infusing sword intent, a girl doll can't do either. Moreover, when forging a sword, if there's a girl doll present, the men will be distracted, so the sword forging won't succeed. When Yun Chujio heard the old man's last words, she couldn't help but have a thought. She raised her eyebrows. Old man, why do I listen to your meaning? When forging a sword, strictly forbidding women to be present, isn't it because it's dirty or unclean? Is it because I'm afraid that the men who forge the sword will be distracted? That's right, so when I forge the sword, I forbid women from approaching so as to avoid distracting those little rascals. Alright, cut the crap. Hurry up and light the fire to forge the sword. If the forging doesn't succeed, don't go out. However, a girl like you probably won't succeed in forging the sword either. It's not bad for you to stay here and clean. The old man said disdainfully. Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and said, Old man, I don't know how to forge a sword at all, so I can't forge the sky dome sword that you mentioned. Let me out. I'll find someone else to help you forge the sword. The old man snorted and said, Don't lie to me. Let me do some calculations. It seems that no one has come in for a long time. Although you're a girl and your spiritual power is terrible, it's still better than no one. Cut the crap and forge the sword. He Xingjiu was about to release Tao Wu and the rest to deal with the elder's remnant soul when the elder sensed something and sniffed. To tell you the truth, the enchantment here is formed by my obsession. You will not be able to get out even if my soul is shattered, unless you forge the firmament sword. He Xingjiu did not know if what the old man said was true, but she did not dare to take the risk. If this place was really the result of the old man's obsession, it would be more troublesome for her to kill the old man. The old man's soul did not dissipate, so he could at least give her some advice. If she killed the old man, she would really be blind. Thinking of this, He Xingjiu instantly smiled like a flower. Senior, I was just joking. To be able to meet you is simply an honor for 3 lifetimes. The old man's remnant soul was almost scared away by this guy's attitude. Was this little girl crazy? She was swearing just now. How did it become my great honor in such a short time? Senior, if I'm not wrong, you should be the sword-forging master of the Nameless Sword sect, right? How should I address you? Which generation are you from? Although the old man could not figure out what Yun Chujio was up to, he still said rather conceitedly, That's right. I am the 5th generation disciple of the Nameless Sword sect. As for my real name, I have long forgotten it. They all call me Jian Feng. Yun Chujio cursed in her heart. Jian Feng? What an image. He was simply a lunatic. However, a 10th generation disciple? She was the 32nd generation disciple of the Nameless Sword sect. This old man was truly a senior. Yun Chujio's heart suddenly jolted. Could this old man know the second half of the sword technique? If she could learn the second half of the sword technique, she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Thus, this fellow said with a smile, So it's Senior Jian Feng. A few days ago I was practicing the sword technique in the backyard. You've seen it too, right? What do you think? Upon hearing her words, Jian Feng. The contemptuous expression on her face was somewhat restrained. The swordsmanship you're practicing is very mysterious. It's even more mysterious than the Nameless Sword sect's Nameless Sword technique. It seems that the Nameless Sword sect has a rising star. Let me ask you, who improved this swordsmanship? Yun Chujio's heart moved again. It seemed that even the 10th generation disciples had never seen the swordsmanship on the cliff. It seemed that there was a big secret behind this swordsmanship. She could not reveal it anymore or it would backfire. As expected, Jian Feng turned his attention to sword forging and said with disdain, It's just that no one has come in for many years. Otherwise, I wouldn't be bothered with you, little girl. Just kill her. You have no foundation in sword forging, yet you still dare to enter my sword hut. You really overestimate yourself. Yun Chujio did not argue with Jian Feng. She said with a smile, I indeed overestimate myself. Otherwise you can just let me go. Why waste your energy? Jian Feng snorted coldly. Stop playing tricks on me. If you can't forge the firmament sword, don't even think about going out. Hearing Jian Feng's words, Yun Chujio knew that she could only forge the sword obediently. She said with a bitter face, Senior Jian Feng, there's no earth fire and no ores here. How can I forge the sword? Jian Feng looked at her as if she was an idiot. With a wave of her sleeve, the earth fire under the furnace started to burn, and a lot of ores appeared on the ground. Now, let's first burn the ores into refined iron blocks, then proceed to the next step. Yun Chujio did as she was told and threw a few ores into the furnace. Then she bitterly waited for the ores to be burned into refined iron blocks. What Yun Chujio did not know was that the moment the earth fire burned in the sword hut, the nameless sword sect exploded. Oh my god! The earth fire switch of the sword hut has actually been activated. This means that someone has entered the sword hut. Tsk, I wonder who is so courageous. What's the difference between this and courting death? One must know that there is Jian Feng's obsession in the sword hut. It is said that no one has ever come out alive from there. However, it is said that Jian Feng's temper is strange. Many people who enter are immediately slapped to death and thrown out. It seems that the one who entered this time has caught his eye. Could it be that a sword forger has entered? Panda N0V1 Master Ouyang also received the news, but after a thorough investigation, he did not find any missing disciples. In the end, it was Elder Gu who reminded him, "Master, didn't Yun Chujio go missing for a few days? Could it be that the person in the sword hut is her?" Master Ouyang, all the higher-ups of the sect looked at each other. Didn't they say that Jian Feng did not like the presence of women when she forged her sword? It was said that because the god of swords did not like women, female disciples were strictly forbidden from approaching the weapon refining furnace. It was precisely because of this that the sword forgers of the nameless sword sect would not allow women to get close to the furnace over time. Why did he leave that little girl Yun Chujio behind now? Elder Wan's heart was filled with hatred. He originally thought that the little girl had fled in fear of punishment. When the time came, he would do something to kill her. He did not expect that she would actually enter the sword hut. However, she would not be able to live long after entering the sword hut. Jian Feng's patience was extremely poor. She would kill the disciples who entered the sword hut at any time. Therefore, even though many sword forgers coveted Jian Feng's sword forgery skills, it had been many years since anyone dared to enter the sword hut again. Elder Wan's conjecture was right. Jian Feng's patience had indeed run out very quickly. He Xinjiu did not have any foundation in sword forgery. After throwing the iron ore into the sword hut, she started to play by herself. Jian Feng was almost angered to death. However, he considered that no one had come in for a long time, and his soul was already very weak. It might dissipate one day, so he decided to bear with it. Finally, under Jian Feng's guidance, He Xinjiu burned the ore into iron. Next, she had to hammer the sword billet. The hammer that hammered the sword billet weighed 1,000 pounds. After hammering it a few times, He Xinjiu did not feel like hammering anymore. "Senior Jian Feng, isn't this enough? Look, this is already in the shape of a sword. It's impossible to hammer this thing into flowers, isn't it?" Jian Feng looked at the pancake-like sword billet and almost died from anger. She roared furiously, "You better hammer it 1,000 times and stop talking nonsense." He Xinjiu shrunk her neck and said embarrassedly, "He'll hammer it then. What are you shouting for? 1, 2, 3. Jian Feng calmed down slightly when she saw Yun Chujio starting to hammer the sword billet. However, she almost fainted from anger. A certain Jiu counted like this: 1, 2, 3, 9, 15, 80, 200, 200, 300. You shut up. Can't you even count? Senior Jian Feng, you're right. I really can't count. Why don't I hammer and you count for me? Jian Feng gnashed her teeth in anger and kept muttering in her heart. It was not easy for someone to come in. She had to endure. Therefore, Jian Feng gritted her teeth and counted. He Xinjiu began to hammer the sword billet. As he hammered, he complained in his heart, "This is not a human's job." Chapter 3785, Puppet Number 4. Yun Chujio hammered it for more than 500 times, but she couldn't move it anymore. Normally, this sword billet could only be hammered by 4 male disciples working together. It was already extraordinary for her to be able to hammer it for 500 times. However, this guy's eyes suddenly lit up. Although she couldn't hammer it, the puppet could. Therefore, this guy let out Puppet Number 4. "Greetings, Master." Yun Chujio waved her hand and stuffed the hammer into Puppet Number 4's hand. She pointed at the sword and said, "You can beat it 500 more times and turn it into the shape of a sword." Puppet Number 4 immediately began to beat it with the same force every time. It was much stronger than He Xinjiu's perfunctory look. Yun Chujio sat down on the ground. Damn it, this forging sword was indeed not suitable for a peerless beauty like her. It was better to let those smelly men think that they were the ones forging the sword. Yun Chujio rested for a while and realized that Jian Feng had not said anything for a long time. She looked up and saw Jian Feng staring at puppet number 4 like a fool, as if he was looking at his beloved girl. Yun Chujio's heart tightened. Oh no. She was so focused on saving trouble that she forgot that puppet number 4 could not be exposed to the public. If Jian Feng had the intention to covet her, it would be difficult to deal with him. However, He Xingjiu thought about it and realized that Jian Feng was just a remnant soul. She was completely confident that she could kill him. Although this place was formed by his obsession, since the earth fire could burn, it meant that there was a passage to the outside world. She was not afraid of being burned by the fire. At worst, she could just leave through the passage of the earth fire. However, it would be more troublesome after she got out. Moreover, she wanted to learn something about sword forging, so she did not go against Jian Feng. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. While He Xingjiu was thinking, she heard Jian Feng's trembling voice say, "Girl, who made this puppet? It has intelligence?" Yun Chujio's heart moved, but she did not hide it. She said directly, "I made it. It has intelligence because I divided a strand of my spiritual sense and made it into a puppet disc." Jian Feng looked at Yun Chujio in disbelief for a while. Seeing that she did not look like she was lying, he mumbled in a daze, "I divided a strand of my spiritual sense and made it into a puppet disc? So that's it. So that's it." Yun Chujio frowned. Was over. Jian Feng had really become a lunatic this time. Jian Feng was stimulated by something, and his figure suddenly disappeared. Yun Chujio shouted for a long time, but Jian Feng did not appear again. Yun Chujio looked at the sword slab that had been beaten neatly by puppet number 4 and felt troubled. She did not know what she should do next. Should she just wait for it to cool down? This guy thought and did the same thing. He did not care about the sword slab, but let puppet number 4 stand guard at the side while she lay on the recliner to rest. She had not slept for 3 days because she had been practicing her swordsmanship. She was very tired just now, so she quickly fell asleep in a daze. After Yun Chujio woke up, she found Jian Feng checking the sword billet that had already been hammered. She eagerly went over and asked, "Senior, what do you think of this sword billet? Is it perfect?" Jian Feng nodded. "Not bad, it is indeed more perfect than hammering with human strength. Next, let's start the filing." After He Xingjiu, this lazy girl, learned how to file, she immediately had puppet number 4 imitate her. Jian Feng didn't say anything, but she would give puppet number 4 some pointers from time to time. After several steps, they finally reached the most crucial step of infusing the sword intent. Pandian 0VE1CM. Next, you try to release all the sword intent and infuse it into the treasure sword, Jian Feng said seriously. Yun Chujio also knew that success or failure depended on this one move. Therefore, she followed Jian Feng's instructions and began to release her sword intent. She also tried to infuse it into the treasure sword. However, it was easier said than done. If infusing sword intent was that simple, the nameless sword sect would not only have a few sword forgers. Yun Chujio tried several times but failed. Jian Feng could not help but shake his head. Could it be that it was the will of heaven? Even if he had found the key to the Skydome sword, he still could not forge it successfully? Yun Chujio's fighting spirit was stimulated. She was not interested in the boring beating of the sword, but she was very interested in this kind of technical thing. Therefore, this guy practiced repeatedly until he was exhausted, and then he stopped temporarily. Jian Feng could not help but scold with a smile, "You little girl, you are a little lunatic. You can practice the sword for a few days without sleep or rest, and you can also practice until you are exhausted by infusing sword intent. If you are not a little lunatic, then what are you?" Yun Chujio also smiled. In some aspects, she was indeed similar to this old man. With the two of them smiling, the estrangement between them from before had dissipated a little. It was as if they appreciated each other. He didn't know if Jian Feng had figured out some things, but in the next few days, even if Yun Chujio failed to infuse her sword will, he wasn't angry. Instead, he even had time to give Yun Chujio some pointers on her swordsmanship. Yun Chujio used to be closed door. Now that she had Jian Feng's guidance, she immediately solved many of the doubts that had troubled her. In her heart, she already regarded Jian Feng as half a master. However, Jian Feng's figure was becoming fainter and fainter, as if he would disappear at any time. On this day, Yun Chujio once again failed to infuse her sword intent. Jian Feng comforted her, "Don't be discouraged. I believe that with your intelligence you will succeed very soon. You little girl, not only are you nimble and clear, but you also have a resolute personality. You will definitely have a great fortune in the future." Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and said shamelessly, "There's no need for that in the future. When I meet you, won't I have a great fortune? Jian Feng was stunned for a moment and then burst into laughter. He laughed and sighed, "It's my great fortune to meet a girl like you. Your words reminded me that I haven't been able to successfully refine the firmament sword because I have to add a trace of spiritual sense into it at the same time. When you can infuse sword intent into it, you'll definitely be able to forge the firmament sword. But unfortunately, I can't hold on for long. I'm afraid I won't be able to see the moment when the firmament sword is out of the furnace." Yun Chujio hesitated for a moment before saying, "Senior, I have an ancient jade bottle. Why don't you go inside? This way I can at least guarantee that your soul won't dissipate." Jian Feng was stunned for a moment before he bitterly smiled, "I appreciate your kind intentions. It's just that my situation is special. My soul is attached to my obsession, that's why it hasn't completely dissipated. I'm afraid that I won't be able to take human form very soon. The moment the obsession disappears, I will completely disappear from this world." Yun Chujio couldn't tell what she felt at that moment. She hadn't been with Jian Feng for long, and they were enemies at the beginning. But now, hearing him say that, she still felt a bit sad. In the end, Yun Chujio had always been a reckless person. The people she thought were good were always good, and the people she thought were bad, she would never like them. For example, Jian Feng, in the eyes of most people, was a lunatic. However, she felt that this old man was not bad, he had a true personality. Moreover, he had taught her sword forging techniques and swordsmanship. In her heart, she already regarded him as half a master. Naturally, she did not want him to disappear just like that. PN0V1 although the firmament sword sounds pretty awesome, it's not a godly sword, right? Isn't the ultimate dream of a sword forger to forge a godly sword? Don't you want to forge a godly sword? After hearing Yun Chujio's words, Jian Feng's expression became a little crazy. Godly sword? That's right, the Skydome sword can only be considered as an upper-grade immortal sword at most. I also want to forge a godly sword that is unique. As Jian Feng mumbled, his entire body became more corporeal than before. Yun Chujio did not know if she was happy or worried. Did she dig herself into a hole and bury herself? However, the words had already been said and it had become a fait accompli. It was useless even if she regretted it. Moreover, Jian Feng was also half her master. So what if she was saved? Jian Feng mumbled for a while before his expression recovered a little. When he saw He Xingjiu, he said embarrassedly and guiltily, "Girl, it seems that you won't be able to leave for a while. We still need to refine a divine sword after refining the firmament sword." Yun Chujio sighed. "I still have a lot of things to do. I don't have time to play with you here. I'm leaving now. I'll come back to save you when I find a way to separate your soul from your obsession." Jian Feng looked at He Xingjiu in disbelief. He felt that the little girl must have been driven mad by the stimulation. She was leaving? Oh. If his obsession did not dissipate, she would not be able to leave this place. Yun Chujio pointed at the earth fire under the furnace. "I'm leaving through the tunnel of earth fire. Although it's a little troublesome, it's still better than letting you die. After all, there's only one Jian Feng in this world." Jian Feng did not care about the gratitude in his heart. He looked at Yun Chujio worriedly. "Little girl, are you feverish or stupid? This earth fire is different from ordinary fire. How could you leave through the tunnel of earth fire?" "Sigh. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have said anything to you about dissipating. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said anything about the divine sword. Don't be anxious. Let's think of another way. We might be able to successfully forge it." Jian Feng did not believe what she said. How could the divine sword be so easy to forge? He was just trying to comfort Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio glanced at Jian Feng, then reached out her hand toward the burning earth fire. Jian Feng cried out in fear, "Stop! Stop! Are you crazy?" However, in the next moment he was stunned. He saw that the little girl's white jade-like hand was not damaged at all, and she even waved her hand proudly in the earth fire. How was this possible? Fire-repelling pearl? You have a fire-repelling pearl? Jian Feng suddenly reacted and exclaimed. Yun Chujio nodded. Firstly, she did have a good impression of Jian Feng. Secondly, she had enough confidence to kill Jian Feng. Therefore, she was not afraid of Jian Feng killing people and stealing treasures. However, Jian Feng's face showed a pleasantly surprised expression. "That's great. Then you can leave this place safely. A little child like you really shouldn't waste time with me here. Since that's the case, you can leave now." Yun Chujio shook her head. "I can't leave now. I'll leave at night. Otherwise, I won't be able to get out of here." In fact, this guy was very uncertain. If he left through the tunnel of earth fire, wouldn't it be too flashy? After a while, Hei Xinjiu changed her mind and decided to leave immediately. Jian Feng was confused. Didn't you say that it would be easier to leave at night? Why are you leaving now? Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and explained her thoughts. She originally planned to leave through the entrance of the earth fire main pipeline, which would be more convenient at night. However, when she thought about it just now, there were too many unpredictable factors to leave through the entrance of the main pipeline. It would be best if she could leave through the exit of the number 9 Forging Sword Hall. That way she could appear in her dormitory without anyone noticing. Then there was a problem. How could she know which of the many pipelines led to the number 9 Forging Sword Hall? The only way was to try one by one. He would hide in every exit of the earth fire and listen to the voices outside. Eventually he would find the pipes of the number 9 Sword Forging Hall. Therefore he could only choose daytime because there were very few people talking at night. He could not determine which sword forging hall or alchemy room it was. Jian Feng felt that what Yun Chujio said made sense, so he nodded. However, he was reluctant to part with her. Whether he was alive or dead, he was only focused on the sword forging. He did not expect to have another connection now. Yun Chujio comforted him. It's okay, it's okay. If this trip is successful, I will come in to see you every once in a while. Although Jian Feng knew that Yun Chujio was comforting him, he also had some thoughts in his heart, and the sadness in his heart could not help but fade a little. Yun Chujio asked puppet number 4 and puppet number 5 to move the furnace away. Indeed, there was an earth fire pipeline under it, and it was just enough to accommodate one person. Yun Chujio waved her claws at Jian Feng and then entered the earth fire tunnel. Although Yun Chujio was not afraid of the earth fire, she had to bend down and walk forward in the tunnel, which exhausted her. After trying more than a dozen exits, she finally found the exit of number 9 Forging Sword Hall. However, she estimated the time. It was only evening now, so she needed to wait for another 4 hours. Outside, Hall Master Zhuge and the east, west, south and north were forging swords. Zhuge Bei said in puzzlement, "Why do I feel that the earth fire today is a little strange? Why is the flame jumping? It seems to be unstable." Zhuge Dong frowned. Perhaps the quality of the earth fire purchased in this batch isn't too good. If you turn the switch a little bigger, there shouldn't be any problems. The two of them did not know that the earth fire was unstable because a certain geo was in the middle of the pipeline. Naturally, the earth fire output was weak and unstable. The speaker did not mean what he said, but the listener was interested. Hei Xinjiu remembered that the other 8 sword forging halls had given a lot of help to number 9 sword forging hall in the past. Moreover, if number 9 sword forging hall was the only one who did not complete the mission this time, number 9 sword forging hall would definitely be punished. However, if the other 8 forging sword halls also failed to complete the mission, then they would naturally not only punish the number 9 forging sword hall. When Hei Xinjiu thought of this, bad water rose up. This guy had already found the pattern of these underground fire pipes after wandering around just now, so he knew that the few pipes near the number 9 forging sword hall were the pipes of the lower house forging sword hall. This guy shamelessly placed a pile of stones not far from the exit of the pipes in the other 8 forging halls. Although the underground fire could burn the stones into ashes sooner or later, it still needed time, right? It was enough to slow down the progress of those 8 forging sword halls. By the time Hei Xinjiu finished her evil deed, it was already the second half of the night. This fellow pricked up his ears to listen. Other than the sound of iron being calcined in the furnace, there was no other sound outside. Yun Chujio knew that because there was no strict time limit for refining iron ore, and there was no need for anyone to watch from the side, the forging sword hall would usually use the night to refine iron ore. Yun Chujio deliberately made a slight noise, but there was still nothing unusual. Only then did she carefully climb out of the earth fire pipe. Yun Chujio put the furnace back into place and then quietly returned to her room. "Hall Master, good morning, my 4 senior brothers." The rice bowl in Zhuge Bai's hand fell to the ground and he rubbed his eyes. Junior Sister Yun? Didn't you run away because you were afraid of punishment?" Yun Chujio glared at him. "I didn't do anything bad, why would I run away? I've been cultivating in the room, alright?" "Cultivating in the room?" Hall Master Zhuge and the others looked at each other. They had looked for many places, but they really hadn't gone to Yun Chujio's room because they had watched Yun Chujio go out and never come back. They would never have thought that she was in their own courtyard. Zhuge Dong frowned. "Junior Sister Yun, since you're in your own room, why didn't you say anything when we called you?" Yun Chujio spread out her hands. "I'm at a critical juncture in my cultivation, so I can't be distracted." Otherwise it would be easy for me to go mad. I'm sorry. Besides, I thought you guys would come into the room to look for me. Who would have thought that you guys didn't come into the room? Hall Master Zhuge and the others took a look. Was this the legendary darkness under the lamp? The most conspicuous place was the easiest to overlook. However, this also explained why the disciples guarding the mountain gate did not see Yun Chujio escape. It was because she did not escape from the sect at all. That's not right, junior sister Yun. Didn't they say that you entered the sword hut? Zhuge 11 asked in puzzlement. Sword hut? What kind of place is the sword hut? I only know of the sword pool and the sword hall. Does our nameless sword sect still have a sword hut? Yun Chujio had a puzzled look. Hall Master Zhuge did not have any doubts, because he originally felt that it was impossible for Jian Feng to keep Yun Chujio. After all, Jian Feng was famous for not liking women, so how could he possibly keep Yun Chujio? The reason why the earth fire in the sword hut was activated was probably because Jian Feng was playing tricks again. It was not because someone had entered. Under He Xinjia's superb lying skills, Hall Master Zhuge and the other three finally confirmed that Yun Chujio had been cultivating in seclusion in her own room these days. Just as Hall Master Zhuge was about to say something, Yun Chujio raised her eyebrows and said, Hall Master, I know what you want to say. Don't worry, I'll go to the discipline hall after breakfast and turn myself in. If I blow up someone's door, I'll compensate them according to the price. No matter how the sect deals with me, I'll obediently accept it. I won't say a word. Hall Master Zhuge's stomach was full of words, and he was instantly rendered speechless by He Xinjiao. Sure enough, after He Xinjiao had her breakfast, she swaggered out of the number 9 sword forging hall and turned herself into the discipline hall. Hall Master Zhuge hesitated for a moment. In the end he asked Zhuge Dong to accompany Yun Chujio. If there was anything he would report it to him. The moment He Xinjiao appeared, the nameless sword sect exploded. Wasn't this the Yun Chujio who blew up the 8 gates? Wasn't this the Yun Chujio who had already fled in fear of punishment? Wasn't this the Yun Chujio who was rumored to have entered the sword hut? Yun Chujio was delighted to discover that her reputation in the nameless sword sect seemed to have grown. It seemed that there was no one who did not know her. This fellow greeted everyone as he walked. It did not seem like he was going to turn himself in. Instead, it seemed like he was inspecting his work. Very soon, many people gathered behind Yun Chujio. Naturally, they were all prepared to watch the show. They were extremely curious about where Yun Chujio had been hiding for the past few days. Why had she suddenly appeared? Very soon, the news of Yun Chujio's appearance reached the ears of the sect's higher-ups. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. What? Yun Chujio wasn't in the sword hut? And she didn't flee in fear of punishment? She actually turned herself in? Although Master Ouyang really wanted to go to the discipline hall to see what was going on, he had to maintain his identity. Naturally, it wasn't good for him to personally ask about the matter of a small handyman. He could only wait for the final result. Manager Song of the discipline hall felt that his right eyelid was twitching non-stop early in the morning. He felt uneasy as if something was going to happen. Just as he was feeling uneasy, his disciples rushed over to report, Manager Song, that Yun Chujio has come to surrender. Manager Song was also quite surprised. He hurried to the square of the discipline hall. Little Dong Dong, isn't it boring for you to stay here all day? Little Dong Dong, if you're really bored, why don't you carry me and walk around the nameless sword sect? Little Dong Dong, haven't you and Cece played together before? Follow me and I guarantee that you will live to a new height. The corner of Manager Song's eyes twitched violently. What the hell were Little Dong and Cece? Besides, these two Heichi were made of stone and didn't have any intelligence. Wasn't she talking to a cow? Manager Song picked up the startled wood on the table and patted it. He Xinjiao acted as if she didn't hear him and continued to flirt with the Heichi. Manager Song had to stretch his neck and shout, Yun Chujio, didn't you come to surrender yourself? What are you waiting for? Come here quickly. Yun Chujio then jumped up and touched the ears of the Heichi. Then she swaggered to the front of Manager Song. Manager Song, you don't have to interrogate me anymore. I'll confess everything. I blew up the doors of the sword forging hall from number 1 to number 8, Yun Chujio said as if she was doing everything by herself. Manager Song was a little surprised. He thought that Yun Chujio would give him a talk, but he didn't expect her to confess voluntarily. Since you confessed voluntarily, then I'll deal with you according to the rules of the sect. You destroyed the property of the sect for no reason, and you hid your whereabouts to avoid punishment. It's very bad. Therefore, in addition to compensating for the loss of the 8 gates, You'll also have to pay a fine of 1 million high-grade spirit stones, and you'll also be locked in the bitter cold cave for 3 months. Do you have any objections? No objections. Manager Song, you've indeed dealt with matters fairly. I admit my punishment. Yun Chujio said obediently. Manager Song was practically looking at Yun Chujio with a whole new level of respect. He originally thought that this troublemaker would stir up trouble, but he didn't expect that she would confess her crimes so smoothly, and she didn't have any objection to the punishment at all. It seemed that he had misunderstood her before. This little girl was just a little playful in the end. In fact, she wasn't as cunning and mischievous as the rumors said. Not to mention Manager Song, even Zhuge Dong felt that there was something wrong with his ear. Was this still the junior sister Yun he knew? Not to mention other things, she actually admitted to a penalty of 1 million upper-grade spirit stones. This fellow was so stingy that he even wanted to take advantage of a green onion in the canteen. Okay? How could he admit to the penalty so obediently? However, Zhuge Dong saw that Yun Chujio was really going to sign on the punishment document. Could it be that junior sister Yun had changed her personality because she had been in seclusion for a few days? Just when Yun Chujio was about to sign on the punishment document, someone in the crowd exclaimed, "Oh my God! What's going on? Why are the ears of the Xieji bleeding? Oh my God, it's true. What's going on? These 2 stone Xieji have been here for tens of thousands of years, and this is the first time such a situation has happened. Does it mean that there is an unjust case? It is said that this Heichi is clearly right and wrong, and that is why it is placed here. This ear is bleeding all of a sudden. I'm afraid there is a reason for it." Manager Song's head buzzed. The matter of Heichi's ear bleeding could be big or small. To say it was just an accident, but to say it was big, it meant that he could not distinguish between right and wrong. If he randomly solved the case, his future in the Nameless Sword sect would be ruined. No wonder his right eye kept twitching in the morning. It turned out that something really bad had happened. Manager Song suddenly widened his eyes. Previously, Yun Chujio had been flirting with Xieji. At the end, when she left, she seemed to jump up and touch Zichi's ear. Could it be her doing? But under the watchful eyes of everyone, she did not do anything. She only touched Zichi's ear. Was it just a coincidence? Just when Manager Song was in a daze, he heard Yun Chujio sigh faintly. Sigh. I was going to turn this into a small matter. It's fine if I can bear with this matter. I didn't expect Xieji to be unable to bear with it. I can only tell the truth. The onlookers thought that there would be no more excitement today and that it would be a downer. Now that they saw that not only Xieji's ear was bleeding, but Yun Chujio also said that there was a secret, they immediately widened their eyes and listened attentively. Although Manager Song was very suspicious, he could not stop Yun Chujio from speaking, so he could only acquiesce. Everyone think about it. I'm not a lunatic or a fool. Why would I blow up the gate of the sword forging hall number 1 to number 8? Besides, there are no worries in the distant days and there are no grudges in the recent days. Why would I offend them for no reason? Everyone could not help but nod their heads. They were also very puzzled. This Yun Chujio seemed to be quite smart. Why did she blow up 8 gates for no reason? Yun Chujio spread her hands. My greatest strength and greatest weakness is that I'm too kind. I feel that it's a great fortune for me to be able to join the Nameless Sword sect. That's why I always think of contributing to our Nameless Sword sect. You should have heard that when I was in the Nameless Ancestral Master's cave abode, I had received guidance from the Ancestral Master. I've always kept this matter in mind. When I went to Forging Hall number 8 that day, Martial Uncle Yang kept shouting at me about how women shouldn't get close to the furnace. I immediately thought of the Grandmaster's words. Isn't this just being rigid and conformist? Yun Chujio paused at this point and observed the expressions of the crowd without batting an eyelid. She saw that many people did not think much of this. This fellow thought to herself, it seems that this patriarchal culture cannot be changed in a short period of time. It would be better for her to change her concept secretly, otherwise she would be easily rejected. And so, she sighed and continued, perhaps you don't understand what I mean. The point I'm talking about isn't to prevent women from getting close to the furnace, but rather, the sword forging techniques of our Nameless Sword sect's sword forgers have always been passed down to our own disciples. The consequence of doing so is that we won't be able to forge enough precious swords to supply the sword pool. Pan Dn 0v1 Swim, but who would believe me if I, little Yen Wei, said it out loud? With no other choice, I came up with the idea of blowing up the door. I wanted the sword forging hall to open its doors and accept new disciples so that those sword forgers could open their hearts and teach more disciples. This way the sword light in the sword pool can be restored as soon as possible, and our nameless sword sect will prosper. Originally, I had planned to say these words that day, but the spiritual energy in my body suddenly fluctuated, so I had no choice but to return to my dormitory to cultivate in seclusion. That's why I showed up today. Forget it, I also know that my status is low, so no one will believe me even if I say these words. It's better to punish me. However, the patriarch once said that if the sword forging hall doesn't improve, he will still warn me. I don't know if he is trying to scare me. The crowd instantly exploded. One by one they whispered and discussed animatedly. Many outer sect disciples had long been eyeing the sword forging technique with covetous eyes, and they were eager for the sect to teach them in public. Even if they could not become sword forging masters, they would still be treated much better as helpers than ordinary outer disciples. Naturally, they agreed with He Xinjia's words. Therefore they argued, yes, junior sister Yun is right. The sword forging hall should open its doors and accept new members. If more people learn the sword forging arts, it will be a good thing for the anonymous sword sect. Now that you mention it, half of the sword auras were missing a few days ago for no reason. Maybe it was a warning from the founder. Junior sister Yun is too kind. She would rather be punished to remind the sword forging hall to open its doors and accept new disciples. She is really our role model. No wonder Zichi's ears were bleeding. It turns out that she knows junior sister Yun was wronged. Yes, I used to speak ill of junior sister Yun in private. I am simply too inhuman. From now on, I am junior sister Yun's most staunch supporter. Manager Song. Junior sister Yun is innocent. We request for junior sister Yun's release. Manager Song suddenly felt as if he had fallen into a pit. He felt that all of this was planned by this little girl in front of him. What kind of clever confession was this? It was all her way of showing off. The matter of the sword forging technique had always been debated within the sect. He did not know if this matter would be an opportunity. He himself hoped that the more disciples who knew the sword forging technique, the better. In that case, the sword light in the sword pool would recover as soon as possible, which would be a good thing for the cultivation of all the disciples. However, he also knew that most sword forging masters would definitely not agree to this matter. This was because the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. If there were more sword forging masters, their status would naturally be difficult to maintain. This was especially so for the sword forging masters of the lower house. Their sword forging skills were average and they were also the most vulnerable. They would definitely have objections. Just as Manager Song was in a daze, there was a commotion in the crowd. Manager Song looked up and saw the hall masters of the number 1 to number 8 sword forging hall. He thought to himself, the plaintiff is here. I'm afraid this matter cannot be resolved. The hall masters of the number 1 to number 8 sword forging hall heard that Yun Chujio had appeared, so they hurried over. Their purpose of coming here was naturally the same, and that was to punish Yun Chujio severely. This concerned the dignity of the sword forging hall. If Yun Chujio's punishment was not painful or itchy, then no one would take the sword forging hall seriously in the future. However, they came a little late after dealing with the matters at hand, but they still heard what Yun Chujio said later. All of them were so angry that their faces turned ashen. The thing that they hated the most in their lives was the public teaching of sword forging techniques. This was simply a threat to their status. Hall Master Yang of Sword Forging Hall number 8, Shan Yanghu, was so angry that his goatee was raised. He squeezed to the front, he pointed at Yun Chujio and said, "Nonsense. This is simply nonsense. Sword forging techniques are the foundation of our nameless sword sect. How can we casually teach them?" Yun Chujio spread out her hands. "I'm just passing on the patriarch's meaning, you don't have to target me. Besides, what you said isn't right either. The foundation of our nameless sword sect is sword arts, and the sword forging technique is just a support. After all, without superb sword arts, what's the use of forging 10,000 swords? Pinin 0v1 that's right. Does a little girl really think highly of herself? Let me tell you, our northern continent isn't like your southern continent. You little girl can be the female emperor of magnificence. In the northern continent, men are respected. You'd better confess honestly." Hall Master Lu from number 2 Sword Forging Hall said disdainfully. Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes, she still had a faint smile on her face. I told you, I'm just a messenger. Anyway, the patriarch said that if you are stubborn there will be a warning. We'll see when the time comes." The onlookers were all hoping that the sword forging art would be made public, so they naturally spoke up for Yun Chujio. Therefore they all shouted, "Didn't the sword hut make some movements in the past few days? Maybe it's the patriarch's warning." What you said makes sense. First, the sword light in the sword pool was reduced by half, and then it was struck by lightning. These few days the sword hut was reactivated again. Could all of this be a coincidence? It must be the forefathers' warning. They are all disciples of our nameless sword sect, but the gap between people is too big. Junior Sister Yun reminded everyone for the sake of the sect's safety, and some people lied for their own benefit. It's really disgraceful. The hall masters of the sword forging hall from number 1 to number 8 were so angry that they were about to vomit blood. They were really sitting at home and trouble came from the sky. First, the gate was blown up and now it became the target of the disciples' crusade. Who did they offend? Hall Master Luo of the sword forging hall number 1's eyes flashed, and he said to Yun Chujio, "Since you said that the patriarch will warn us, then well wait and see. If there is really a warning then so be it. If there is no warning then it is just your lies that confuse the masses. We will definitely ask the sect master to punish you severely and expel you from the sect." Yun Chujio laughed bitterly. "Did you all see that? I told you that I should have just admitted my punishment. Now you want to expel me from the sect just because of a disagreement? I'm really unlucky." The bystanders were filled with righteous indignation. Wasn't this obvious bullying? Junior Sister Yin didn't say anything. She only conveyed the patriarch's intention. How did it become a bewitching rumor? Besides, what did Junior Sister Yin want? Wasn't it still for the sect's sake? Why did she want to expel her from the sect? Hall Master Luo was obviously more composed than the other 7. Most of the disciples present were outer disciples of the lower house. They couldn't cause any trouble at all. Moreover, the sword forgers in the sect would basically not agree to the matter of the sword forging technique being made public. When that time came, a few sword forgers would help speak up in front of Sect Master Ouyang, and this Yun Chujio would definitely be expelled from the sect. Just as Hall Master Luo was feeling pleased with himself, he heard Yun Chujio sigh faintly. "Alright, since it has already come to this point I can't refuse. Then let's see if the patriarch will send a warning. I believe that the patriarch will not play a trick on me. There will definitely be a warning and it will definitely be related to the sword forging hall." Hall Master Luo and the others sneered. This Yun Chujio was really daring. They really wanted to see what the so-called warning was. Zhuge Dong was about to cry. How could this junior sister Yun always turn a small punishment into a disaster? Originally, she would receive some punishment and then go to the bitter cold cave for 3 months. This matter would be over, but she just had to say something about the sword forging technique being made public. Wasn't this just looking for trouble for herself? He didn't have any objections to this. Moreover, Hall Master Zhuge had also said in private that the sect should let more disciples with foundations learn the sword forging technique. This would be beneficial to the development of the sword forging technique. However, the vast majority of sword forging masters would not think so. Regardless of whether they succeeded or not, there would probably be more people who would resent Junior Sister Yun in their hearts. Moreover, what kind of ancestral master's teachings? Wasn't she just poisoned by a poisonous mushroom? Why would there be any warning? Zhuge Dong sighed non-stop. He had already informed Hall Master Zhuge of the news previously. However, he felt that there was no point in informing or not informing. Every time Junior Sister Yun got into trouble, it was not something that Hall Master could solve. Hall Master Yang rolled his eyes. Yun Chujio, there should be a time limit, right? How about 3 days? If nothing unusual happens within 3 days, we can go directly to the sect leader. 3 days? That's too long. Let's make it 6 hours. However, in order to prevent you and your disciples from concealing it, you can't use your identity jade token or voice transmission talisman. Don't tell me you don't dare to agree? Yun Chujio said indifferently. Hall Master Yang and the others were naturally eager for it. They sneered and said, "Why wouldn't we dare? Well, agree to it." Zhuge Dong sat on the ground. It was over. Junior Sister Yun seemed to have gone into closed-door cultivation stupidly. If she could still think of a solution in 3 days, what could she do in 6 hours? Wasn't she courting death? At this time, Hall Master Zhuge squeezed out from the crowd. Just as he was about to help Yun Chujio plead, Hall Master Yang said with disdain, "I say, where did this Yun Chujio have the guts to blow up the gates of our 8 sword forging halls? It turns out that you, Zhuge Zhongyuan, are the mastermind behind this. TSK, I heard that if you guys don't complete the mission this month, you will be kicked out of number 9 Sword Forging Hall. So you instructed Yun Chujio to come here to divert our attention. You are really sinister. Chapter 3795 Hall Master Zhu of the number 7 Forging Hall also echoed with a fake smile. That's right, some people just refuse to accept reality, and even think that they are the Hall Master Zhuge from the past. Unfortunately, now they have to resort to such a low-class method to protect the position of the Hall Master of the lower house's Sword Forging Hall. It really makes people feel a little emotional. The other Hall Masters also followed suit and ridiculed Hall Master Zhuge. Hall Master Zhuge's thin and weak body was trembling in anger, but he was so angry that he could not speak, he just clenched his fists tightly. Hei Xinjiu could not stand to see the person she was protecting being bullied the most. Her small face darkened immediately. Some people have dirty hearts but they think others are the same. How shameless. Stupid girl, say another word. Manager Song, you heard it too. This Yun Chujio publicly insulted the senior of the sect. According to the sect rules, shouldn't she be punished? Hall Master Zhu said angrily out of embarrassment. Yun Chujio spread her hands. Hall Master Zhu, I was talking about some people, not you. Why did you come to pick up the scolding yourself? Do you think that the characteristics I said are quite compatible with you? So you bravely came to pick up the scolding? Yun Chujio's words immediately made the disciples who were eating melon seeds burst into laughter. This Yun Chujio's words were really interesting and there was nothing wrong with what she said. That's right, she didn't mention her name, but this Hall Master Zhu was stupid enough to go up and pick up the scolding, so stupid. Hall Master Zhu was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. Just as he was about to say something, Hall Master Luo stopped him. Hall Master Zhu, why do you have to argue with a little girl? When the 6 hours are up, there will naturally be some reasoning. Hall Master Zhu thought that it made sense. This stinky girl had a sharp tongue. He wouldn't be able to gain any advantage by arguing with her. In any case, when the 6 hours were up, this stinky girl would be expelled from the sect. There was no need for him to fight with her. Thus, Hall Master Zhu glared at Yun Chujio fiercely and didn't say anything. Hall Master Zhuge originally wanted to help Yun Chujio plead for mercy, but now he could only sigh deeply. In his heart, he thought that this little girl was really not well behaved. Why would she cause trouble every few days? Moreover, she specially picks trouble from the sky to provoke. She really knows how to be evil. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Time flew by quickly. Soon nearly 2 hours had passed. Nothing had happened, and he had not heard of any abnormal situation in the Sword Forging Hall. Hall Master Zhu and the others could not help but become even more complacent. A little girl still wanted to fight with them? She really overestimated herself. Hall Master Zhuge and Zhuge Dong looked very worried. On the other hand, Yun Chujio was leisurely chatting with the Xieji in the east. Little Dong Dong, thank you for helping me to seek justice. I knew you were the most fair and righteous beast. Little Dong Dong, do you think some people are so stupid? How can the patriarch's words be false? TSK, in a while, someone will regret it. Little Dong Dong, guess what kind of warning the patriarch will give? It can't be that he will make those 8 hall masters become women, right? Puchi. Everyone was tickled by Yun Chujio's words. This Yun Chujio was really a clown. Speaking of which, they really didn't want her to be expelled from the sect. Other things aside, ever since this Yun Chujio entered the sect, their dull sect life had become a lot more fun. At this moment, Hall Master Yang's identity jade token started to tremble. As he had said at first, Hall Master Yang could only ignore it, thinking that it was probably unimportant news. However, very soon Hall Master Zhu and the others' identity jade tokens also started to tremble, and the voice transmission talisman in the storage ring also started to tremble non-stop. Hall Master Yang and the others, who were initially relaxed and proud, suddenly became a little bewildered. Why were their identity jade tokens and voice transmission talismans ringing at the same time? Could it be that something had happened in the Sword Forging Hall? Although Hall Master Yang and the others wanted to know what exactly had happened right away, they had to console themselves first. It must be a coincidence, it must be a coincidence. Nothing would happen to the Sword Forging Hall. Nothing would happen. A certain Jiu who was chatting with Xieji saw the situation and strolled over leisurely. Are you guys not confident now? I think it's most likely that the Patriarch has sent a warning. Now you don't have to say that I'm misleading people, right? Hall Master Yang snorted. It's just a coincidence. Don't be complacent. It's going to be 6 hours soon. Just wait to be expelled from this sect. Yun Chujio just chuckled and didn't argue. She just looked at the entrance of the square calmly. The disciples were all very excited. It seemed that something really happened. It seemed that what Yun Chujio said was true. But how would the patriarch warn them? While everyone was discussing, a disciple rushed over. Someone recognized that person and exclaimed, "He's Lin Jin from the number 8 Sword Forging Hall." Did something happen to the number 8 Sword Forging Hall? Hall Master Yang's heart was in his throat. Just as he was about to stop Lin Jin from speaking, he saw Yun Chujio asking with a worried expression, "What happened to the number 8 Sword Forging Hall? Senior brother, did something happen to the number 8 Sword Forging Hall? Hurry up and say it so that everyone can help give advice. Hall Master Yang, don't you think so?" Hall Master Yang was about to stop her, but he could only swallow his words. He squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth, "Say it?" Lin Jin felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Didn't Hall Master say that he was going to severely punish Yun Chujio? Why did he see that Yun Chujio was alive and kicking, but the Hall Master's expression was so ugly instead? However, due to the urgency of the matter, Lin Jin did not have the time to think too much. He said anxiously, "Hall Master, there's a problem with the earth fire. After breakfast, we originally planned to take out the iron block that was forged last night. We did not expect that only half of the ore inside had been refined. After some investigation, we found that even if we turn the earth fire switch to the maximum, the flame of the earth fire is only 1/10 of its original size. Moreover, the flame is very unstable and there's no way to forge a sword." Lin Jin's words immediately caused the crowd to explode. "Look, Yun Chujio is right. Isn't this a warning?" "That's right, the earth fire has always been very stable. How could there be a problem for no reason? Moreover, it happened at this time. Obviously, it's a warning from the patriarch." "That's right. If it were anything else, it could be that someone deliberately played tricks. However, this earth fire is different from other things. Only those who are desperate would dare to have ideas about the earth fire." Pan DN0V1 Seom Lin Jin was confused. What warning from the patriarch? What on earth had happened? Hall Master Yang's expression was very complicated. He was worried and angry. In short, it didn't look good. He said with a fierce expression, "It's just a sudden incident. Moreover, it's only our number 8 Forging Sword Hall that has a problem with the earth fire. The other Forging Sword Halls are doing as usual. It's not a warning at all." Hall Master Zhu echoed from the side, "That's right. It's just a coincidence. A problem of the Forging Sword Hall doesn't mean anything unless all 8 of us have a problem." As soon as Hall Master Zhu finished his sentence, a few disciples rushed over. They were all disciples of the Sword Forging Hall. "Hall Master, there's a problem with the earth fire." "Hall Master, it's not good. For some reason the earth fire has become very weak. Not to mention the Sword Forging Hall, even the iron ore cannot be refined." "Hall Master, something big has happened. The earth fire is flickering. It seems to be going out." The disciples of the Sword Forging Hall all reported in fear. The content was basically the same. There was something wrong with the earth fire. Hall Master Zhu and the others' expressions were very interesting. Even if they were unwilling to admit it, they had no excuse at this time. This was because other than the forefathers' warning, they really could not explain why the earth fire of the 8 sword forging halls had gone out of control. Yun Chujio smiled faintly. "This question is very easy to prove. Manager Song, you're the most impartial. Why don't you ask if there's any problem with the earth flames in the pill refining room?" If there's no problem with the earth flames in the pill refining room, then Hall Master Luo has nothing to say, right? Seeing Yun Chujio's smile, Hall Master Luo felt a little flustered. He had an illusion that everything was arranged by this little girl in front of him. However, how could this be possible? The entrance to the earth fire was guarded by someone, and the earth fire pipeline was buried underground. She didn't have the ability to do anything. Could it really be the Patriarch's warning? Soon, Manager Song received a reply from the pill refining room. Everything was as usual and there was no problem. This time, Hall Master Luo and the others immediately became listless. No matter how unwilling they were in their hearts, they could only leave dejectedly. The disciples who were eating melon seeds immediately cheered, as if this was their victory. Manager Song wiped the cold sweat on his head. He always felt that this matter was so unbelievable. However, now that the plaintiff did not pursue the matter, he naturally would not be so stupid as to offend Yun Chujio. "Yun Chujio, since the 8 hall masters have already let you go, you can go back now. Yun Chujio nodded and said a few polite words before leaving the discipline hall under the escort of the crowd. Hall Master Zhuge and Zhuge Dong followed behind the crowd with blank faces. They kept feeling that everything was like a dream. Only then did Zhuge Dong recall that the earth fire of their number 9 sword forging hall yesterday evening was also not quite normal. It was just that it was not as obvious as the other few. Could it really be a warning from the patriarch? The news quickly spread to the higher-ups of the sect and Master Ouyang. Master Ouyang was dumbfounded. Eating a poisonous mushroom could not only create 3 sword moves, but it could also receive the warning from the patriarch? Soon, a disciple in charge of managing the earth fire went to the forging sword hall in the lower house to check the situation. Unfortunately, he could not find out the reason. Moreover, he found that with the passage of time, the situation of the earth fire had actually begun to improve on its own. It was simply mysterious. Therefore, this matter became an unsolved case. They could only attribute it to the patriarch's warning. Then the problem came. Should they teach the sword forging technique to the public? The sect immediately fell into another argument. For a moment it was extremely noisy. It was estimated that there would not be any conclusion in a short while. However, this matter made Yun Chujio's poisonous mushroom incident even more mysterious. It was to the extent that a few stupid disciples deliberately ate the poisonous mushroom to imitate it and almost lost their lives. Shinjio was very relaxed. She could not be bothered with these things. The forefather's warning was just a way for her to clear her name. As for the bleeding of Xieji's ears, it was even easier. When she touched Xieji's ears, she threw a few spiritual bees into his ears. The legs of those spiritual bees were stained with bright red flower juice. She just needed to get some from them according to her arrangement. Later, she went to talk to Xieji and took the opportunity to put those spiritual bees back into the spiritual beast bag. As for the remaining flower juice in Xieji's ears, it did not matter at all. After all, the matter was over. It did not matter whether Manager Song believed it or not. As long as he did not have any evidence against her, it was fine. The reason why this guy was deliberately mystifying was that she was not popular among the disciples to begin with. Moreover, the evidence of the explosion of the door was conclusive. If she did not make some gimmicks, who would listen to her? Moreover, with the evidence of Xieji, her words were even more convincing. Because of this, the 8 sword forging halls naturally could not complete the mission. Even Hall Master Zhuge and the others felt much more relaxed. Since they could not complete the mission, they did not have to worry about being punished. Moreover, now that the sword forging hall was in the middle of a storm, the sword pool naturally did not dare to publicly make things difficult for the number 9 sword forging hall at this time, for fear of causing any more trouble. Therefore, the atmosphere in the number 9 forging sword hall was very relaxed recently, and even Hall Master Zhuge's temper was a little better than before. Yun Chujio was also too lazy to compete with him. After a few days in the sword hut, this fellow felt that the time-consuming and laborious task of forging swords should be left to those foolish men. As for the matter of infusing sword intent, she decided to settle down for a period of time. Perhaps one day she would be able to figure out the key to success. Yun Chujio pondered over it for a few days. She felt that in order to achieve the goal of isolating or even destroying the 9 pavilions, the most important thing was to raise her status. She was only a small handyman now and didn't have any say at all. The only reason she was able to meet Master Ouyang and the others was because she was once the female emperor of Zephyr. Otherwise, a small piece of trash like her wouldn't even be able to meet an elder. After inquiring about the situation, this fellow decided to think of a way to become an outer sect disciple first, and then plan step by step. There was only one way for a handyman of the Nameless Sword sect to become an outer sect disciple, and that was to earn enough sect contribution points. As for the way to earn sect contribution points, that was to accept missions. Every mission completed would earn the corresponding sect contribution points. Yun Chujio could not help but curse in her heart. The Nameless Sword sect's calculations were really shrewd. With such an assessment method, the servants would naturally work for the sect without regrets. Most importantly, it was very difficult to earn sect contribution points. And to become an outer disciple, one had to earn at least 5,000 contribution points. Some servants could not earn 5,000 contribution points even after decades of time. After Yun Chujio asked around, she decided to go to the bounty hall of the lower house to see if there were any suitable missions. Very soon Yun Chujio arrived at the bounty hall of the lower house. It was filled with odd job workers who came to accept missions. Because some missions were more popular, they were very noisy. Yun Chujio frowned and then looked at the bulletin board. The missions on it were nothing more than running errands, planting, picking and hunting demon beasts. The corresponding contribution points were also pitifully small. At most, it was only 5 contribution points. Hei Shinjio counted with her fingers. 5 contribution points per mission. Wouldn't it take 1,000 missions to accumulate 5,000 contribution points? This was too slow. If she accepted these missions step by step, it wouldn't be reliable at all. She had to think of other ways. This guy was never a person who followed the rules. He blinked his eyes and was thinking of a way when a weak voice came from the side. Yun, junior sister Yun, you are also here to accept missions? So it's senior brother Lu. Not bad, I am here to accept a mission, but I haven't seen a suitable one, Yun Chujio said with a smile. The servant in front of her could be considered as an old acquaintance of Yun Chujio. It was the servant who delivered meals to Yun Chujio every now and then, Lu Liang. Lu Liang had always been ostracized in the canteen. Otherwise, he would not have been pushed out to deliver meals to the number 9 sword forging hall. However, ever since he took on this task, his days in the canteen had been a little better. After all, no one was willing to take on this task, so he did not make things difficult for him. Therefore, Lu Liang was still somewhat grateful to Yun Chujio in his heart. Moreover, he was quite envious of Yun Chujio's willful personality. That was why he had the courage to come over and greet her. Seeing that Yun Chujio's attitude was quite kind, Lu Liang became a little more daring. I wonder what kind of mission junior sister Yun is looking for. I am quite familiar with these missions. I can help you introduce them. The corners of Yun Chujio's mouth curled up. There are many contribution points. Are there any that can earn hundreds or thousands of contribution points in one go? Lu Liang, at this moment, he only had one thought in his mind. He should not have picked a fight with this little pervert. A few hundred contribution points. Why didn't she rob him? Seeing that Lu Liang did not speak, Yun Chujio knew that there was an 80% chance that it was impossible. Could it be that she could only earn 5 contribution points? At this moment, a male voice said, Junior sister Yun, do you want to earn more contribution points? It's not impossible to earn a few hundred contribution points. You can even earn 1,000 contribution points in one go. Yun Chujio turned her head and saw that the disciple who spoke was very unfamiliar. However, he was wearing the uniform of a handyman, so he should also be a handyman. When the male voice saw Yun Chujio looking at him, he continued to say politely, Junior sister Yun, you may not know me. I am also a disciple of the lower house. However, I am usually in charge of cleaning in the sword hall of the lower house, so you may not have seen me before. Sword hall of the lower house? Yun Chujio could not help but raise her guard. Previously, Uncle Master Wan and Luo Hai and Yu Bo did not avoid talking in the sword hall. It was obvious that most of the people in the sword hall of the lower house were Elder Wan's people. This man with the croaky voice probably had bad intentions. Oh? May I know how to address this senior brother? What is the matter with the few hundred contribution points you mentioned just now? Yun Chujio asked with a faint smile. In Jiarene. Junior sister Yun can just call me senior brother Jia. The mission board is filled with missions that are not difficult. The missions with high contribution points are on the second floor. Junior sister Yun can consult the manager. The smile on Yun Chujio's face deepened. Senior brother Jia's character is indeed the same as his name. Thank you very much. After Yun Chujio finished speaking, she turned around and walked towards the manager's office of the Bounty Hall. Lu Liang thought for a moment and followed after her. Jiarini first curled his lips in disdain, then his expression became a little ugly. Was it the same as his name? Was Yun Chujio talking about benevolence or false benevolence? Junior sister Yun, I heard that the mission on the second floor is very dangerous. If none of the servants who accepted the mission on the second floor come back alive, don't take the risk. Moreover, I heard that Jiarini is not a good person. I'm afraid he doesn't have any good intentions, Lu Liang said in a low voice. Yun Chujio said indifferently, thank you for your reminder, senior brother Lu. I'll go up and take a look first. If it doesn't work, then I won't accept it. Lu Liang shook his head. He didn't want anything to happen to Yun Chujio. After all, if something happened to this little pervert, his situation in the canteen would probably be difficult again. Therefore, he decided to go up to the second floor to take a look as well and think of a way to stop Yun Chujio from accepting the mission on the second floor. Yun Chujio and the manager of the Bounty Hall said that they wanted to go up to the second floor to take a look. The manager glanced at Yun Chujio a few times. If other odd job workers had made this request, he would definitely sneer at them. However, when he thought of a certain Joe's glorious history, he quickly opened the entrance to the second floor. Yun Chujio hopped up to the second floor and Lu Liang followed her up to the second floor. As expected, there were no other servants on the second floor except for the manager who was in charge of registration. The manager glanced at Yun Chujio and Lu Liang with a disdainful look in his eyes. He was certain that they did not dare to accept the mission on the bulletin board. Yun Chujio's eyes were sparkling and she was overjoyed. TSK, the missions on the second floor are still better. I can get 5,000 contribution points just by accepting a few missions. That's great. Yun Chujio said excitedly. Lu Liang was speechless. You only saw the contribution points at the back, but look at those abnormal missions at the front. Not to mention the odd job workers, even inner disciples might not be able to complete these missions. Otherwise, how could there be so many contribution points? However, these missions were more time-consuming, laborious, and dangerous. Therefore, they were eliminated from the middle and upper house missions to the lower house. Yun Chujio naturally knew that these missions were not easy to complete, but this was what made it challenging. She stared at the bulletin board for a while, and finally walked to the steward and said, I accepted the 9th mission, which is to go to the Myriad Bone Mountain to find Emojwasher. Lu Liang sat on the ground. Among all the missions, going to the Myriad Bone Mountain to find Emojwasher was the most contribution points. It was a total of 1,000 contribution points, but it was also the most dangerous. Not to mention Yun Chujio, who was only a small handyman in the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm, even inner sect disciples who went to Mount Wangu had to team up before they dared to go in. Moreover, there was no guarantee that they would be able to come out unscathed. Wasn't she courting death? The manager in charge of the registration also had a dull look on his face. He thought that he had heard wrongly and asked with some uncertainty, You said that you were going to take the mission to Mount Wangu to look for Emojwasher? Yun Chujio nodded with certainty and handed over the identity jade token. Please help me register. The manager endured it and said, Mount Wangu is very dangerous and Emojwasher is hard to find. Are you sure? Yun Chujio nodded again. Thank you for the reminder, but I still want to try. Seeing that Yun Chujio was determined, Manager Ming could only shake his head. Then he took Yun Chujio's identity jade token and began to register. Yun Chujio said to Lu Liang beside her, Senior brother Lu, why don't we go together? Lu Liang shook his head like a rattledrum. He didn't want to die. He was basically certain that he would soon return to the days of being bullied because Yun Chujio was dead for sure. After the steward finished registering, he handed Yun Chujio a token to enter the sect. Only then did Yun Chujio and Lu Liang go down to the second floor. Jiaorini immediately came up and asked eagerly, Junior Sister Yun, I didn't lie to you, did I? Is the mission on the second floor full of contribution points? Yun Chujio smiled and nodded. Thank you, Senior Brother Jia. I accepted the mission to look for Emojwasher on Mount Wangu. When I become an outer disciple, I will definitely thank you properly. Jiaorini was also stunned when he heard that Yun Chujio had accepted the mission to look for Emojwasher at the Myriad Bone Mountain. He thought that Yun Chujio would at most accept a mission of 100 contribution points. He did not expect that Yun Chujio would actually seek death by accepting the mission to look for Emojwasher at the Myriad Bone Mountain. Wasn't she seeking her own death? However, his smile quickly changed. He pretended to be polite for a while before he left in a hurry. Yun Chujio sneered in her heart. She naturally knew what Jiaorini had gone to do. It was nothing more than to send a message and take credit for it. Lu Liang tried to persuade Yun Chujio again, wanting to rein her in. In the end, when he saw that Yun Chujio had made up her mind, he could only leave dejectedly. PN0V1 therefore, Yun Chujio only sent a message to Zhuge Dong when she arrived at the gate of the sect. Then she swaggered out of the mountain gate. Yun Chujio summoned her flying spirit tool and quickly disappeared without a trace. On the other side, after Elder One received the news, his heart was instantly filled with joy. There were many misgivings in the sect if he wanted to make a move, but once that wretched girl left the sect, there was only death awaiting her. Elder One immediately arranged for people to go to the Myriad Bone Mountain to chase after Yun Chujio. He was determined to kill Yun Chujio with his life. Not only that, the 9-layered pavilion also received the news that Tower Master Luochen had personally led people to the Myriad Bone Mountain to capture Yun Chujio. After all, if Yun Chujio was in the sect, he would not be able to make a move due to the reputation of the Nameless Sword sect. Unfortunately, these people waited until the seas dried up and the rocks turned rotten, but they still did not see He Xinjiu. Not only that, the two sides even fought due to suspicions and misunderstandings. The people sent by Elder One were no match for the 9 pavilions. More than half of them were dead or injured and they fled back in a sorry state. When Elder One received the news, he nearly vomited blood. Could that damned Yun Chujio know the invisibility spell? They had set up an inescapable net, so how could they not find her whereabouts? Actually, the reason was very simple. He Xinjiu did not go to the bullshit Myriad Bone Mountain at all. At this moment, a certain Jiu who had already taken the transfiguration pill was strolling around the city near the Nameless Sword sect. It was simply too carefree. This fellow was so smart. How could he be so stupid as to really go to the Myriad Bone Mountain to be a live target? He was just fooling around with those people. As for Emoge was sure He Xinjiu had a lot of it in her storage ring. They were all stolen from Xiao Hei's cave abode back then. When the time came, she could just casually get a few pieces to hand over to them. After He Xinjiu had enough of showing off outside, she bought a bunch of food and a bunch of random things before returning to the Nameless Sword sect. The news that Yun Chujio had accepted Emoge Washer's mission had already spread throughout the lower house. Therefore, when everyone saw that Yun Chujio had returned safely, they were all dumbfounded. Initially, they thought that Yun Chujio would definitely die in the Myriad Bone Mountain. Who would have thought that not only did she return alive and kicking, she was also in high spirits. It was not like she had escaped death, but it was more like she had gone somewhere to have fun. However, everyone soon felt that they had guessed the truth. Perhaps Yun Chujio would regret it after accepting the mission and did not go to the Myriad Bone Mountain at all. She only went out for a stroll. That's right, junior sister Yun. Just tell us the truth. We won't laugh at you. Young people are really ambitious. After suffering a few more setbacks, they will know what it means to be extremely ambitious. Yun Chujio only smiled and did not say anything. She strolled towards the bounty hall. When everyone saw that Yun Chujio did not respond, they thought that Yun Chujio was too ashamed to tell the truth. They all followed behind her and were ready to laugh at Yun Chujio's misfortune. Lu Liang was overjoyed when he heard the news of Yun Chujio's return. He did not care whether Yun Chujio found Emoge was sure or not, as long as this little pervert came back. Thus he rushed to the bounty hall. Junior sister Yun, you're back? That's great. It doesn't matter if you didn't find Emoge was sure. Hurry up and return the jade token to the manager. Then take on a suitable mission on the first floor. I think a mission to look after the herbs would be good. Lu Liang could not stop babbling, perhaps because he was too excited. Yun Chujio glanced at him and was about to go up to the second floor to hand in the mission. Unexpectedly, the manager on the first floor said, "Just hand over the jade token to me. There's no need to go up to the second floor." When the manager on the first floor said this, his tone was quite contemptuous. He knew that this Yun Chujio would never be able to complete the mission on the second floor. Yun Chujio seemed to not notice his contempt. She walked to him with a smile and took out a piece of inkshua stone and placed it on the table. Boom. The crowd immediately exploded. Oh my god, this Yun Chujio actually found the inkshua stone? And it completely fits the size of the requirements. I got 1,000 contribution points. The steward was also very surprised. He paused and said, "Congratulations, you have successfully completed the mission. Pass me the identity jade token, and I will help you record the contribution points." Yun Chujio smiled slightly. "No rush. I want to ask, is one piece of black shua stone worth 1,000 contribution points? If I have 5 pieces, can you give me 5,000 contribution points directly?" The steward was stunned at first, then he sneered. "Of course, but don't be too greedy. The ink stone is different from other minerals. It's scattered. Not to mention 5 pieces, even finding 2 pieces at once is an extremely difficult thing." The onlookers also pursed their lips. This Yun Chujio was too complacent. She was already burning incense after finding 1 piece. Why would she dream of having 5 pieces? This was simply nonsense. Just as everyone was discussing, Yun Chujio took out an inkstone and placed it on the table. Before everyone could cry out in surprise, another inkstone was placed on the table. Everyone looked at the 5 inkstones on the table in silence. Did Yun Chujio really find 5 inkstones? Many people even rubbed their eyes. They felt that everything in front of them was so unreal, as if they were dreaming. The manager was also stunned. Did she really find 5 inkshua stones? What did 5 inkshua stones mean? That was 5,000 contribution points. Wouldn't Yun Chujio be directly converted to an outer disciple? The steward was stunned for a while before transferring the 5,000 contribution points to Yun Chujio's identity jade token. Then, he said dryly, "Go to the miscellaneous affairs hall to handle the following procedures." Yun Chujio thanked the steward politely and then walked out of the bounty hall unhurriedly. The disciples looked at Yun Chujio's back with envy and jealousy. Yun Chujio's luck was too good, wasn't it? She went out and not only did she not die, she even got 5 pieces of black shua stones? How many odd job workers had not collected 5,000 contribution points in decades? Yun Chujio just went out for a walk and collected enough? Yun Chujio had only entered the sect for a total of 2 months, right? She had actually become an outer disciple so easily? Lu Liang was even more regretful and wanted to bang his head against the wall. If he had known earlier, he would have agreed to go to Mount Wangu with Yun Chujio. It was too late to say anything now. After Yun Chujio became an outer disciple, she would definitely not stay in the number 9 sword forging hall anymore. Then wouldn't his future days be miserable again? Yun Chujio happily went to the odd job hall and placed the identity jade token in front of Manager Yu. "Manager Yu, help me to handle the procedures for the identity conversion." Manager Yu was confused. He was a little confused when he saw Yun Chujio appear in front of him. Didn't she go to Mount Wangu to die? Why did she come back? Also, what identity change? Yun Chujio, what identity change did you say? Do you have a document? Yun Chujio frowned. Document? The bounty hall didn't give me a document. Didn't they say that a sect can be converted to an outer sect disciple after reaching 5,000 contribution points? What document? Manager Yu opened his mouth wide. You mean you've earned 5,000 contribution points? Yun Chujio didn't say anything. She just handed over the identity jade token in her hand. After Manager Yu looked at the contribution points inside, he was dumbfounded. This Yun Chujio should be the handyman who turned into an outer disciple at the fastest speed in the history of the Nameless Sword sect, right? Manager Yu finally calmed down with great difficulty and then began to help Yun Chujio with the relevant procedures. The treatment of outer disciples was much better than that of handymen. Not only did they not have to work, but they could also receive a certain amount of sect supplies every month. They could also enter the lower house's sword hall to learn sword techniques. Manager Yu then pointed to a notice board at the side and said, "The red dot on it is already full of people. You can choose any of the remaining green dots." Full of people? Do you mean that there are several people living in each courtyard? Yun Chujio asked, puzzled. 4 outer sect disciples share a courtyard, but the rooms are independent. It's not bad. Manager Yu was quite patient with Yun Chujio. PN0V1 there's no one with their own house? Even if the location is slightly off, it's fine if the conditions are slightly worse. Manager Yu shook his head. If you want a house with only one house, you'll have to become an inner disciple. Outer disciples don't have this kind of treatment. Yun Chujio couldn't help but curse in her heart. The Nameless Sword sect was such a big place, yet they were so stingy. Can't they build a few more courtyards? Yun Chujio was about to tell Manager Yu that she might as well just stay in Sword Forging Hall number 9. She didn't expect someone to come over and say, "Manager Yu, it's not like there's no separate courtyard. Have you forgotten that place?" The one who spoke was a disciple of the Miscellaneous Affairs Hall. After hearing his words, Manager Yu frowned. Aren't outer sect disciples supposed to have 4 people in a courtyard? Where is there a separate courtyard? The disciple pointed at a corner on the bulletin board. Manager Yu, have you forgotten that there's another courtyard here? Manager Yu followed the direction of the disciple's finger and frowned even more. Nonsense. It's not like you don't know that there's something strange about that courtyard. It's been abandoned for many years. How can there be people living there? That's because the people who live there are all ordinary people. If a genius like Junior Sister Yun were to live there, perhaps nothing would happen. Junior Sister Yun, don't tell me you don't dare to try? The disciple said with a slightly provocative tone. Yun Chujio smiled faintly. Why wouldn't I dare? Manager Yu, then he'll live in that courtyard. Manager Yu was about to persuade her, but coincidentally, someone came to look for Manager Yu to talk about something else. The disciple received Yun Chujio's jade token attentively and helped her with the formalities. Junior Sister Yun, when you arrive at the courtyard, you can use your identity jade token to open the restriction of the courtyard. In addition, unless you become an inner disciple, you can't change the courtyard. When the disciple said the last sentence, he seemed to be gloating. Got it? Thank you for the reminder, senior brother. Yun Chujio glanced at the disciple with a slightly cold gaze. Another person had appeared on the black ledger in her heart. The disciple could not help but feel a little guilty. He had thought that Yun Chujio would find fault with him, but he did not expect Yun Chujio to leave so slowly. After manager Yu finished dealing with the matters on the other side, he saw a green dot at the corner of the bulletin board. He glared at the disciple and sighed in his heart. Yun Chujio lived in such a courtyard. She should seek her own fortune. Yun Chujio did not go directly to her new residence. Instead, she first went to number 9 Sword Forging Hall. Hall Master Zhuge and Dongxi were very happy for Yun Chujio when they learned that Yun Chujio had become an outer disciple. After all, the treatment of outer disciples was much better than that of laborers. Zhuge Bei said with some reluctance, "Junior sister Yun, are you going to move out in the future? You must remember to come back and visit us often." Zhuge Dong also smiled and said, "It's good to move out. When the time comes, 4 female disciples will be living in a courtyard. Junior sister Yun will be able to make more friends." Zhuge Bei curled his lips. What's good about that? Who knows what the character of the 3 people who live together is like? Junior sister Yun is so pure and kind, she will be bullied. Zhuge Dong. He really wanted to ask Zhuge Bei, "Are you blind? This little pervert is still so pure and kind?" Pan Dn 0v1 Xiaomei private courtyard? Hall Master Zhuge and the north, south, east and west were all stunned. Everyone knew that the outer disciples were all 4 people in a room. How could Yun Chujio be assigned to a private courtyard's dormitory? Yun Chujio told them everything that had happened. She pointed at a place on the map and said, "Here, it's here." Hall Master Zhuge's expression immediately changed. "Nonsense. You can't live here at all. That disciple of the Miscellaneous Affairs Hall is obviously trying to trick you. You don't have to move anymore. You should still live here." East, west, south and north didn't look too good either. Zhuge Dong sighed. "Junior sister Yun, you're usually quite smart. Why did you fall for it so easily this time?" Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and asked, "Senior brother Dong, what's wrong with this courtyard?" This courtyard is a famous haunted house in the Nameless Sword sect. Any disciple who stays there for less than a month will definitely suffer from chi deviation. In the beginning, many people did not believe it, but those who went in without exception suffered from chi deviation. As time passed, this courtyard remained empty. So, junior sister Yun, you should still stay here. Don't move in. Zhuge Dong said with a serious expression. Unfortunately, after Zhuge Dong finished speaking, he didn't see any fear on Yun Chujio's face. Instead, that little pervert's eyes were sparkling with interest. PN0V1 after Hei Xinjiu said that, she ran out of number 9 Sword Forging Hall, ignoring the shouts of Hall Master Zhuge. Hall Master Zhuge was so angry that he gritted his teeth. This little girl was too ridiculous. Hall Master, you don't have to worry too much. That courtyard hasn't been occupied for a long time. It must be very dilapidated. Junior sister Yun might regret it after seeing it. Zhuge Dong comforted him. Hall Master Zhuge felt that what he said made sense. That little girl was just curious. Perhaps she would back out after knowing the difficulty. Hei Xinjiu hopped towards her new residence as she pondered in her heart. Chi deviation? She wanted to see what exactly caused it. The reason why this fellow was so confident was because she had the black pearl. All kinds of mental demons were like floating clouds in front of her. Yun Chujio's courtyard was in the northernmost part of the outer sect disciples' dormitory district. Furthermore, it was still some distance away from the dormitory district. It stood there alone. Some of the outer sect disciples who had received the news looked at Yun Chujio from afar. Their mouths twitched. This Yun Chujio was really stupid. She actually chose that famous haunted house. Wasn't she looking for trouble? It wouldn't be long before this Yun Chujio would go crazy. Yun Chujio naturally didn't take the discussions of these people to heart. She went to the entrance of the courtyard and used her identity jade token to open the restriction. Then she pushed open the courtyard door. The courtyard was a barren scene. There were weeds all over the ground. Even the roof had weeds growing on it. It seemed that no one had lived there for a long time. Yun Chujio closed the courtyard door and opened the restriction again. Then she let out puppet number 4 and puppet number 5 to clear the weeds on the ground. She jumped onto the roof and began to clear the weeds on the roof. Soon, the weeds on the courtyard and the roof were cleared. Yun Chujio squatted on the roof and looked at the small courtyard. She felt that it was not bad. There were 4 rooms in total and the yard was quite spacious. Even if the pretty boy came with black chicken head and the little lunatic, it would be enough to live in. The most important thing was that there were no other dormitories around. It was very private, so she felt more at ease living in it. Yun Chujio tidied up the 4 rooms again. Although the furniture inside had fallen a lot of dust, it was still good after it was wiped clean. After such a busy meal, the sky was already dark. Yun Chujio casually ate something and then let Buttface out. Buttface had a good meal in the yard and then went into Yun Chujio's bedroom. "Little fairy, why do you think those people went mad?" Before Yun Chujio could answer, Buttface continued, "But, little fairy, you definitely won't go mad because your heart is black. You have been a little devil for a long time. Yun Chujio, get lost." Chapter 3806. Fear of Ghosts. Buttface. Yun Chujio taught Buttface a lesson and then ordered him to keep watch while she lay comfortably on the bed and fell asleep. First, Buttface dutifully checked the yard and found nothing unusual. Then he lay down beside Yun Chujio's bed and began to chew on the bones happily. This guy was most likely born with the shell of a dog, so his habits became more and more like a dog. He liked to chew on the bones whenever he had nothing to do. In the middle of the night, Yun Chujio was sleeping soundly when there was a knock on the door. Before Buttface could react, Yun Chujio shouted with a face full of killing intent, "Who is it? Is there something wrong with you? Why are you knocking on the door in the middle of the night? Get lost." The knocking on the door suddenly stopped as if nothing had happened. Buttface was also shocked by a certain Gio's shout. He thought to himself that he had to learn a lesson in the future. He must not disturb this little demon's sleep. This little demon was too angry when he woke up. Buttface originally wanted to go out and check, but he was afraid that he would wake Yun Chujio up. In the end, he laid on the ground and did not move. This time, nothing unusual happened until the sky was bright. Yun Chujio was awakened by the vibration of the identity jade plate. She unhappily probed her spiritual sense and found that it was a message from Zhuge Dong. It was nothing more than to confirm her condition. Yun Chujio endured her anger and replied a few words. Then she lay on the bed like a little bastard and continued to sleep. It was not until noon that Hei Xinjiu stretched herself and got out of bed. Buttface flattered her. "Little fairy, you are even more beautiful today than yesterday. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site." Thanks. Yun Chujio glanced at him and slowly washed up. Then she opened the courtyard door with Buttface. She wanted to see who was knocking on the door in the middle of the night. When she arrived at the courtyard door, she saw that there were no footprints of other people or demon beasts other than her own footprints yesterday. Buttface covered his mouth with his paw. "Little fairy, it must be a ghost." "It's a ghost? I'm so scared." Yun Chujio sneered. "If only it's really a ghost. I can catch a few to play with." Buttface could not help but shiver. Damn, this little demon was not human at all. She actually wanted to catch a ghost to play with. It scared the baby to death. Yun Chujio looked at Buttface with disdain. Was this coward an ancient fierce beast? It was so hilarious. "Buttface, what's the difference between a ghost and a remnant soul? If you're not afraid of a remnant soul, why are you afraid of a ghost?" Buttface shivered. How? How is that the same? A remnant soul can't float outside, but a ghost can. Moreover, ghosts don't make any sound when they walk. They float and float. It's so scary. The ghosts that float out are all resentful. They strangle people's necks whenever they want. Woo-woo, how terrifying. Yun Chujio really couldn't be bothered with this idiot. Wasn't he just a drifter? What was there to be afraid of? The most terrifying thing in this world wasn't any demons or ghosts, but the human heart. After Yun Chujio turned around, a cunning look flashed across Buttface's eyes. The little girl was still too inexperienced. She didn't even know that the ghosts it was talking about weren't ghosts, but the ghost race. That was a terrifying clan. When Dog 2 thought of this, its whole body trembled again. It hurriedly chased after Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio had a simple breakfast. Originally, she wanted to leave Dog 2 in the yard to look after the house. However, Dog 2 cried so much that it didn't leave any tears behind. Yun Chujio had no choice but to put it into the spirit beast bag. Chapter 3807. Receiving the sex resources. Yun Chujio was speechless at Buttface. Why was this idiot getting more and more cowardly? Yun Chujio left the courtyard and was about to go to Sword Forging Hall number 9 for a stroll when she unexpectedly met Zhuge Dong on the way. Although Zhuge Dong had communicated with Yun Chujio in the morning, he still wanted to see with his own eyes. Now that he saw that Yun Chujio was alive and kicking, he was relieved. Junior sister Yun, it just so happens that today is the first day of the Lunar New Year. Let's go, he'll bring you to collect the sect's resources for the outer sect disciples. Yun Chujio had heard Zhuge Bei mutter that because they had not completed their mission, the sect's resources were always withheld. She was really curious about what the so-called sect's resources were. Thus, Yun Chujio followed Zhuge Dong to the miscellaneous office. Very quickly, Yun Chujio received her own sect's resources. It turned out to be 2 bottles of pills. The label on the bottle said that it was a 9 transformation spirit pill. Yun Chujio knew that this 9 transformation spirit pill was a level 27 pill. Although she had never refined it, she did not think that it was anything precious. This guy muttered softly, I thought it was something good, but there are only these 2 bottles of broken things? The corner of Zhuge Dong's eyes twitched violently. Broken things? The outer disciples were about to break their heads because of the 9 revolutions spirit gathering pill. It was only then that Yun Chujio noticed that Zhuge Dong did not receive the sect's supplies. She asked curiously, Senior Brother Dong, why aren't you going to receive them? The sect's supplies for our Sword Forging Hall's disciples are not collected at the General Affairs Office, but at the Stewarding Hall of the Sword Pool. Zhuge Dong was a little apprehensive. He did not know if the sect's supplies would be distributed in full this month. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Ever since the big kitchen knife swallowed half of the sword light, Hei Xinjiu did not dare to go near the sword pool because of her guilty conscience. After hearing Zhuge Dong's words, she thought it would be good to go to the edge of the sword pool to repent. Therefore, this guy accompanied Zhuge Dong to the sword pool. Zhuge Dong went in to collect the sect's resources, while Hei Xinjiu went to the sword pool at the side. This guy looked at the sword pool that was no longer as glorious as before, and his conscience was a little painful. He estimated that if he wanted to restore the sword pool to its previous appearance, he would have to throw at least 100,000 swords into it. It was all because of that greedy big kitchen knife. While Yun Chujio was repenting by the side of the sword pool, Zhuge Dong came over with an unsightly expression and called for her to leave. Yun Chujio caught a glimpse of Zhuge Dong's expression and asked in puzzlement, Senior Brother Dong, what happened? Zhuge Dong said with some anger, the stewarding hall of the sword pool has deducted more than half of our sect's resources again. It's really going too far. Yun Chujio frowned. Why did they deduct your sect's resources? Didn't they not complete the mission last month? They said that the other sword forging hall didn't complete the mission because there was a problem with the earth fire, but there was no problem with the earth fire of our number 9 sword forging hall, so they had to deduct the sect's resources. Senior Brother Dong, can't you tell them that the other sword forging hall has several more disciples than our number 9 sword forging hall? Zhuge Dong smiled bitterly. Of course I did. However, the steward said that if they didn't consider the fact that our number 9 forging sword hall has fewer people, they would have kicked us out of the number 9 forging sword hall. Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes. She was a little angry. However, she thought that it was not a big deal to just confiscate some of the sect's resources. Moreover, Hall Master Zhuge and the 5 steamed buns did not resist. She did not have to fight with them. Therefore, she did not say anything and prepared to leave the sword pool with Zhuge Dong and go to the number 9 sword forging hall to see the others. Chapter 3808. Attacking at the first sign of disagreement. Yun Chujio and Zhuge Dong had only taken a few steps when they heard someone say sarcastically, Hey, isn't this Yun Chujio who got advice from the patriarch? Is there a need for you to come to the sword pool to cultivate? Can't you just eat a few poisonous mushrooms when you have nothing to do? Everyone burst into laughter when they heard that, and all of them winked at Yun Chujio. When Yun Chujio was still a handyman, these disciples still had a faint sense of superiority, so they felt that Yun Chujio's words were quite interesting, so they weren't dissatisfied. However, they didn't expect that Yun Chujio had dog shit and luck, and she actually turned into an outer sect disciple so quickly. They were more or less uncomfortable in their hearts. Those female disciples originally had enmity towards Yun Chujio because of Tower Master Luochen, and now they were even more displeased with her. A good dog doesn't stand in the way. Get lost. Yun Chujio was already angry in her heart, but now that she saw this person deliberately provoking her, she immediately found a way to vent her anger. That disciple was stunned at first and then said angrily, What did you say? Say it again. Yun Chujio was about to speak, but Zhuge Dong whispered to her, "Junior sister Yun, this Li Zhuangji is the son of manager Li of the sword pool. Don't offend him, let's go." Li Zhuangji also heard Zhuge Dong's words. He snorted coldly, "What? Are you afraid now? It's too late. Let me tell you, Yun Chujio, if you don't apologize to me today and compensate me for a certain amount of damages, you can forget about leaving this place." "Damages? How much do you want?" Yun Chujio raised her eyebrows. Li Zhuangji had long heard that this Yun Chujio was actually the southern continent's female emperor of Zephyr. She must be very rich. He opened his mouth wide and said, 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones. Yun Chujio curled her lips. 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones? That's too little. How can you be so cheap? Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks you. Stupid girl, if you don't do as I say today, I'll teach you a lesson. Li Zhuangji had always been successful because of his father's relationship. Now that he was being ridiculed by Yun Chujio, he was naturally very angry. Yun Chujio did not reply but only stretched her wrists. Just when everyone was wondering what Yun Chujio was going to do, Yun Chujio had already arrived in front of Li Zhuangji. Taking advantage of the time when Li Zhuangji did not react, she took advantage of the situation. She restrained his spiritual power and then gave him a good beating. "Fuck, I told you to block my path. I told you to covet my money. I told you to threaten me. They'll beat you to death." Other than Yun Chujio's rhythmic cursing, only Li Zhuangzi's miserable wails were heard because everyone was dumbfounded. The Nameless Sword sect had never seen such a person who attacked at the slightest disagreement. Because the sect rules strictly forbade fellow disciples from killing each other, disciples who got into a fight would be punished by the sect rules. Only then did they realize that this Yun Chujio had a criminal record. On the day she had just entered the sect, she had already beaten up Elder Wan's grandson. On the second day after she had entered the sect, she had also beaten up the servants of the lower house's canteen. Later on, she had even blown up 8 gates of the Forging Sword Hall. Everyone could not help but take a few steps back. How could they forget that this Yun Chujio in front of them was a fearless person? It was really not a wise move to provoke her. Especially those disciples who had joined in the jeering just now. They tried their best to reduce their presence, afraid that Yun Chujio would beat them up too. After Yun Chujio beat Li Zhuangji into a pig's head, only then did she feel that the pent-up anger from the morning and the depression from just now had been released. She kicked Li Zhuangji again and then said fiercely, "Remember next time, a good dog doesn't block the path. If you block my path again, I will beat you until even your mother doesn't recognize you." Chapter 3809. The surging killing intent. Li Zhuangji was in pain and anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damn girl, just you wait. I won't let you off." Yun Chujio looked at him with disdain. She took out a piece of paper and started writing. Then she grabbed Li Zhuangzi's hand and pressed a handprint on the paper. Li Zhuangji had a bad feeling in his heart. He asked with a trembling voice, What is this? A loan? It says here that you borrowed 2,000,000 high-grade spirit stones from me today, and you will pay it back within 3 months. If you don't pay it back by then, in the future your sect's resources will be sent to me to pay off the debt until it is paid off. Yun Chujio said with a smile. Unfortunately, this smile fell into Li Zhuangzi's eyes, and it was like an evil spirit. You forced me to press this, it doesn't count at all? Yun Chujio shrugged and took out a large kitchen knife from her storage ring. She gestured at the crowd. I forced you to press it? Do you have any witnesses? Come, let me ask you who saw me force him. Some of the surrounding disciples disdained to participate in such a fight. Some didn't want to stir up trouble, and some were afraid that Yun Chujio would burn them with anger, so they remained silent. Yun Chujio's pupils suddenly shrank. She took the large kitchen knife and cut Li Zhuangzi's face. Instantly, Li Zhuangji howled like a pig being slaughtered. Everyone was shocked. What did this Yun Chujio want to do? She had already beaten Li Zhuangji up, why did she still want to cut him? Yun Chujio held the large kitchen knife that was dripping with blood and shook it. Then she showed a very bright smile. You all remember. This idiot fell down and fell like this. If anyone talks nonsense, I will bleed him. Also, although I, Yun Chujio, have low spiritual power and am only an outer disciple, if anyone dares to provoke me, I will make them regret being born in this world. If you don't believe me, let's try. After saying that, Yun Chujio did not call Zhuge Dong. She directly took the bloody kitchen knife and left the sword pool. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Zhuge Dong was worried and quickly chased after her. Just as he was about to say something, Yun Chujio said in a hurry, "Senior brother Dong, I will visit you another day. I will go back to the dormitory first." After Yun Chujio finished speaking, she left in a hurry without waiting for Zhuge Dong's reply. Zhuge Dong frowned. He guessed that since junior sister Yun had caused trouble again, Manager Li would definitely not let it go. Could it be that junior sister Yun had gone back to think of a solution? He was stunned for a moment and decided to tell Hall Master Zhuge about the matter. Although he knew that Hall Master Zhuge could not help much, it was always good to have more people to think of a solution. Yun Chujio sped all the way and finally arrived at her own courtyard. After she entered the courtyard, she panted heavily and directly collapsed on the ground. After a long while, she looked at the large kitchen knife in her hand with a complicated gaze. Yun Chujio originally did not intend to cut Li Zhuangji, but at that time, a thought suddenly emerged in her mind: kill him. Kill him. She managed to suppress the surging killing intent with great difficulty, and in the end she only cut Li Zhuangzi's face. Could it be because of the large kitchen knife? However, the spiritual consciousness of the large kitchen knife had not appeared again since the last time it appeared by chance, and it looked very ignorant. Logically speaking, it shouldn't have such a strong consciousness. What exactly was going on? Yun Chujio could not understand it, so she simply released the dumb cubs and asked for their opinions. Chapter 38:10 Was she possessed? When the kitten heard Yun Chujio's words, it was delighted. Haha, this wretched girl was obviously possessed. She might very soon vomit blood, and her spiritual power would plummet. In the end she would go crazy or die. This was great. The kitten's eyes flashed with a flash of pride, but it was caught by the little black bird. Xiao Hanio suddenly said, "Master, the kitten said that it knows what's going on." Xiao Hanio. Yun Chujio looked at Xiao Hanio and asked, "Speak. If you know and don't report it, HMP." Xiao Hanio's heart was like a dog that had been bald. Damn ugly bird. If there was a chance in the future, he would be the first to eat it. Xiao Hanio originally wanted to groan and muddle through, but when he saw Yun Chujio's cold gaze, he could not help but tell the truth. That master, you seem to have gone mad." After saying that, the kitten was extremely vexed. Why did he tell the truth? It was really useless. Yun Chujio frowned. Had he gone mad? Logically speaking, if he had gone mad, how could Blackbeard not react? Buttface suddenly cried out, "Little fairy, how is it? I told you that this place is haunted. Let's quickly move to another place. This place is too scary." Yun Chujio glanced at Buttface and her heart skipped a beat. Could this place really be a haunted house? Had she gone mad after staying here for one night? Just as Yun Chujio was puzzled, Meng Yinsho suddenly said, "Someone is coming. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site." Thanks. Yun Chujio immediately put silly Meng into her spirit beast bag and took out a spirit fruit to chew on. A moment later there was a knock on the door. "Yun Chujio, someone reported that you beat up a fellow disciple. Come with us to the discipline hall." Yun Chujio's eyes flashed. Since she had the guts to beat someone up, she was naturally not afraid of being punished. If it was not for the unforeseen circumstances that happened later, she would have gone straight to the discipline hall after beating someone up. The villain would complain first. Yun Chujio opened the courtyard door. She said to the discipline hall's disciples, "My courtyard is a haunted house. Aren't you afraid of going mad? Next time just use your identity jade token to inform me. You don't have to come and arrest me personally. I'm very self-aware." When the discipline hall disciples heard Yun Chujio's words, they hurriedly retreated some distance. Yes, they almost forgot that this was a haunted house. However, they felt the taste in Yun Chujio's words. Next time? It seemed that this person was not going to stop. Ever since she entered the sect, their discipline hall would receive reports about her every once in a while. This little girl was really a troublemaker. Yun Chujio followed the discipline hall's disciples to the discipline hall's small square. Li Zhuangji was supported by someone and stood at the side. Beside him stood a middle-aged man. He must be Manager Li. When Li Zhuangji saw Yun Chujio, he wished he could pounce on her and strangle her to death. Although Manager Li was very calm, his eyes were full of killing intent. Manager Song looked at the discipline hall's regular customers in front of him and silently sighed in his heart. How long had it been? This person had caused trouble again. Just as he was thinking about it, he heard Yun Chujio shout, "Manager Song, you have to make a decision for me. I suffered a great grievance in the sword pool today. If it wasn't for the seniors of the discipline hall who came in time, I would have hanged myself. The discipline hall disciples looked at each other in confusion. Hang themselves? They remembered that when this little girl opened the door for them, she was still chewing on a spiritual fruit. Don't tell them that she intended to be a glutton. Chapter 38:11, Killing Intent reappeared. Li Zhuangji was so angry that he gritted his teeth. Yun Chujiu, you're spouting nonsense. You were clearly the one who beat me to such a state, and you even forced me to write you a loan of 2 million yuan. You're simply the villain who complained first. Yun Chujiu looked at Li Zhuangji in disbelief. You, how can you be so shameless? You were clearly the one who fell to such a state. What has it got to do with me? On the other hand, you threatened me not to go to the sword pool to cultivate in the future, and even said that the sword pool belonged to your Li family. It was up to your Li family to decide who went and who didn't go. You also said that if you want to go to the sword pool, it's not impossible. You asked me to lend you 2 million high-grade spirit stones. I'm such a timid person, so I had no choice but to give you 2 million high-grade spirit stones. Later you seem to have committed a crime. You beat yourself up and even cut your own face. I took the opportunity to let you write in debit notes so that you wouldn't go back on your word. Manager Song, this is the whole process. If you don't believe me, you can ask the disciples who went to the sword pool to cultivate today. They all saw it with their own eyes. The corner of Manager Song's eyes twitched violently. If it wasn't for the fact that a disciple of the discipline hall happened to be cultivating by the sword pool and told him the whole process, he might have really believed this nonsense of Yun Chujiu. Li Zhuangji was so angry that his fingers were trembling. He wanted to argue, but his anger attacked his heart and he actually fainted from anger. Yun Chujiu spread out her hands. Manager Song, did you see that? He fainted because he had a guilty conscience. Manager Song. At this time Manager Li sneered. Yun Chujiu, you really have a sharp tongue. Do you think that everyone will be afraid of you and won't come out to testify? Heaven's net is wide open but it doesn't leak out. You will definitely be punished by the sect rules today. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Yun Chujiu narrowed her eyes. This Manager Li was much better than his good-for-nothing son. There was a witness? Then there was. After Manager Li and Manager Song greeted each other, a few disciples squeezed in from the crowd and described what happened. Of course, they skipped over the part where Li Zhuangji provoked Yun Chujiu. They pushed all the blame onto Yun Chujiu. One of the disciples even said, Manager Song, this Yun Chujiu used a kitchen knife to cut junior brother Li. You can compare it. Manager Song really knew that Yun Chujiu had a big kitchen knife. She used this kitchen knife to compete with Master Ouyang. Therefore Manager Song said, Yun Chujiu, hand over that kitchen knife. I'll let someone check it. Yun Chujiu did not object. She took out the large kitchen knife from her storage ring. However, as soon as she held the large kitchen knife in her hand, a monstrous killing intent appeared in her mind again. She wished that she could kill everyone present. Yun Chujiu managed to control the killing intent in her body with great difficulty. She was afraid that there was something wrong with the large kitchen knife, so she had no choice but to put it away. Yun Chujiu's face was pale, and her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. In the eyes of everyone she looked guilty. Li Zhuangji, who had woken up, gritted his teeth and said, What? You don't dare to hand it over, do you? You have a guilty conscience. Yun Chujiu, you beat up a fellow disciple for no reason, and you refuse to repent. Just wait to be punished in bitter cold cave. Li Zhuangzi's noisy voice made the killing intent in Yun Chujiu's heart grow stronger. There were even faint purple lightning flashes in her lowered eyes. Fortunately, at this moment, the black bead in Yun Chujiu's dantian trembled. Yun Chujiu's dantian was in pain, and only then did she regain a trace of clarity. Chapter 38:12. The abnormal Yun Chujiu. The purple lightning in Yun Chujiu's eyes suddenly disappeared, but there was still a murderous intent in her heart. She could only rely on her will to suppress it. She knew that if she continued to delay, she might not be able to control herself and cause a big disaster. Therefore she smiled bitterly and said, The sword pool has been controlled by the Li family for a long time. I, a small outer disciple, naturally can't contend with it. Forget it, I don't want to explain anymore. Manager Song, you can do as you like. Manager Song, what did he mean by do as you please? These words sounded as if he and Manager Li were in cahoots. He patted the desk and said with an unhappy expression, Yun Chujio, our discipline hall is concerned with evidence. Now that the witnesses and evidence are all here, they can prove that you beat Li Zhuangji. If you can't provide strong evidence, I can only enforce the law impartially. Yun Chujio said with a pale face, then we'll deal with it according to the sect rules. I have no other opinions. Once Yun Chujio said that, not only Manager Song, even the onlookers were very surprised. This was completely inconsistent with this troublemaker style of doing things. This guy would be unreasonable and unreasonable. Why did he confess so easily today? Although Manager Song was a little surprised, he thought that since Yun Chujio had already confessed, no one would be able to say anything, so he said, okay, since you have confessed, then according to the sect rules, beating a fellow disciple will be punished according to the severity of the circumstances. Li Zhuangzi's injuries are not too serious, so you will be imprisoned in the bitter cold cave for a month. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. The reason why Manager Song said this was because although Li Zhuangzi's injuries looked quite miserable, Yun Chujio did not hurt his vital parts. He would be fine after 2 days of recuperation. Yun Chujio nodded. I admit my punishment. Although Manager Song did not understand what Yun Chujio was up to today, he was afraid that she would cause any more trouble, so he immediately ordered someone to escort her to the bitter cold cave. Li Zhuangji suddenly thought of the loan slip and quickly shouted, wait. My loan slip. Manager Song, ask Yun Chujio to return the loan slip to me. Without waiting for Manager Song to speak, Yun Chujio took out a piece of paper from her storage ring, waved it in front of everyone and then tore it into pieces. The scraps of paper were blown away by the wind. Yun Chujio glanced at Li Zhuangji and Manager Li indifferently. Her eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent, which scared Li Zhuangji so much that he didn't dare to say a word. Even Manager Li felt a chill on his back. How could this wretched girl have such a strong desire to kill? When he looked again, Yun Chujio had already gone far away with the people from the discipline hall. Not long after Yun Chujio walked out, Zhuge Dong ran over with a worried look. He saw Yun Chujio's pale face and her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. He asked worriedly, Junior Sister Yun, are you not feeling well? Yun Chujio shook her head. I'm fine. I'm just angry. I didn't expect that evil man Li Zhuangji to complain first. He actually slandered me for beating him up. He was clearly the one who fell to the ground. Zhuge Dong, Junior Sister, what's going on? Don't you know what's going on? The corner of Zhuge Dong's eyes twitched. He continued, it's good that you're fine. The hall master asked me to bring you some food to keep you warm. Take care. Yun Chujio nodded and put away the things. Then she left with the disciples of the discipline hall. Chapter 38 13 Bitter Cold Cave. After almost 2 hours, Yun Chujio finally arrived at Bitter Cold Cave. Bitter Cold Cave, as the name implied, was naturally a place with extremely harsh conditions and extremely cold. It was rather strange to say that this bitter cold cave was located not far from the main entrance of the earth fire. Even though it was constantly roasted by the earth fire, the inside of the bitter cold cave was still extremely cold. After the disciples guarding the bitter cold cave checked the document archives of the discipline hall, they locked Yun Chujio up in the second bitter cold cave. In fact, the bitter cold caves of different numbers were basically the same. It was just that they were built to isolate the people who were closed, so they built a stone wall in the middle to separate the bitter cold cave into several rooms. At this time, the surging killing intent in Yun Chujio's heart had weakened a lot. She felt that it was not bad to stay in the bitter cold cave for a month. At least, she wanted to see if this inexplicable killing intent was related to the haunted house. Yun Chujio sized up the second bitter cold cave. There was nothing inside, but the temperature was frighteningly low. Fortunately, Hei Xinjiu had the 10,000-year-old fire marrow in her hand, and she also had the cloak of the nine-tailed fox. She did not feel that it was too cold. Perhaps it was because it was too cold here. Yun Chujio felt that the killing intent in her body suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if everything before was an illusion. Yun Chujio remembered that every time there was an abnormality, it was because of the large kitchen knife. Hence, she took out the large kitchen knife, but this time there was no abnormality at all. Yun Chujio was puzzled, so she let Dog 2 out. Dog 2, on the other hand, was resistant to the cold. It ran a few rounds in the bitter cold cave and said with its spiritual sense, "Little fairy, this bitter cold cave is simply tailor-made for you." Yun Chujio kicked it in annoyance. What did it mean by tailor-made for her? Was she born to be punished? After being kicked, not only was Dog 2 not angry, but it even came up to her and said, "Little fairy, have you forgotten? The great void soul repairing formation needs to be carried out in a very cold place. Isn't this the right place? Come and read on our website Wuxia World site." Thanks. Yun Chujia's eyes lit up. That's right. Last time, because the heaven and earth energy around the bottomless ice abyss had been sucked dry, she had no choice but to stop the great void soul repairing formation. This nameless sword sect must have a lot of heaven and earth energy which could be used to repair souls. However, the area of bitter cold cave number 2 was a little small, so it was not enough to set up the great void soul repairing formation. She looked at the stone walls on the left and right sides. Then this guy knocked on the left wall with a big kitchen knife. "Hey, is there anyone next door?" After knocking for a while, there was no movement on the left side. Yun Chujio picked up the big kitchen knife and knocked on the right wall again, but there was still no reaction. So this guy started to hit the wall. This guy had already made a plan. At most, when he left, he would just build the wall again. He was not afraid of being exposed. This guy quickly knocked down the wall on the left and then started to knock down the stone wall on the right. After a while, the stone wall on the right was also knocked down. Then this guy was dumbfounded. Because in the bitter cold cave on the right, there was a middle-aged man sitting cross-legged with a stubble beard. He was looking at Yun Chujio, who was holding a large kitchen knife, in shock. Yun Chujio smiled awkwardly and politely. Damn it, was this a dead person? She had knocked and smashed him so hard that he did not make a sound. Now he had come out to scare people. Well, that martial uncle, I'm new here. Please take care of me. Yun Chujio said with a dry smile. The middle-aged man was dumbfounded. Was this person here to be punished or to demolish the bitter cold cave? Chapter 38:14, Uncle Master Zhang. Although the middle-aged man was silent, under Yun Chujio's shameless verbal attack, Yun Chujio finally understood why the middle-aged man did not respond when she knocked on the wall. It turned out that the stone used for the walls of the bitter cold cave was a soundproof stone. It was used to prevent the disciples imprisoned in the bitter cold cave from chatting. Of course, the person who designed it did not expect that a pervert like Yun Chujio would smash the walls, so they did not use the reinforcement formation on the wall. Uncle Master, my name is Yun Chujio. I am an outer disciple of the lower house. This time I was locked up because I beat up the son of the sword pool steward. May I know your name? How did you get in? How long will you be locked up for? Yun Chujio naturally had her reasons for asking this question. This fellow could not wait for this person to leave as soon as possible so that she could set up the great void soul repairing formation. My surname is Zhang. After the man said this, he did not say anything else. It was obvious that he did not want to say anything more. Yun Chujio rubbed her hands. She was the second bitter cold cave. If she wanted to set up the formation, she could only open up the third bitter cold cave where the man was. If he did not leave, she would not be able to set up the formation at all. Therefore, she asked again with perseverance, Martial Uncle Zhang, then why were you locked up here? How long did you have to be locked up for? Martial Uncle Zhang didn't even look at her. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate, as if he didn't hear Yun Chujio's question. Yun Chujio was so angry. But there was nothing she could do. She couldn't force him to talk with a big kitchen knife. This fellow rolled his eyes. If he couldn't use force, then he would use force. This fellow set up a bonfire on the ground and began to roast the meat. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Uncle Master Zhang opened his eyes and glanced at Yun Chujio, who was roasting the meat. How could she still have the mood to roast the meat after being locked in the bitter cold cave? This little girl had a big heart. Soon the aroma of the roasted meat spread. Yun Chujio said with a smile, Uncle Master Zhang, come and eat the roasted meat. Martial Uncle Zhang acted as if he didn't hear her. He didn't even lift his eyelids. Buttface had been craving for it for a long time. He used his spiritual sense to say to Yun Chujio, little fairy, that's a fool. Ignore him. Let's eat quickly. Yun Chujio glared at Buttface and scolded him with her spiritual sense. Eat, 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 eat. You only know how to eat. You're timid and greedy. Who would believe that you're an ancient fierce beast, Cheongqi? You dumbass. Buttface wagged his tail and said, little fairy, your scolding is so nice. If you scold me a few more times, I will feel uncomfortable if you don't scold me 8 times a day. Yun Chujio, however, this fellow was also hungry. He decided to start eating roasted meat with Buttface and ignored Uncle Master Zhang. When Buttface was half full, he said slyly, "Little fairy, do you have wine? I heard that big chunks of meat eat meat. Drinking wine in big gulps is the true hero. Let me try." Yun Chujio wished she could slap Buttface on the wall, eat a big piece of meat and drink a big mouthful of wine. Did he think he was a bandit? However, she was moved. She took out a wine gourd and said to Uncle Master Zhang with a smile, "Uncle Master Zhang, I have some good wine here. Are you in the mood to come over and have a few drinks?" Although Uncle Master Zhang still didn't say anything, Yun Chujio noticed that his eyelids were trembling. Apparently he was tempted. Yun Chujio pursed her lips in her heart. It turned out that he was a drunkard. Therefore, He Xinjiu opened the lid of the wine gourd and deliberately shook it. Immediately, a strong wine fragrance drifted out. Uncle Master Zhang's eyelids trembled even more. "Uncle Master Zhang, it's fate that we met in this bitter cold cave. Come and have a few cups to keep warm," Yun Chujio said again with a smile. Chapter 38-15 The Past of Martial Uncle Zhang. Martial Uncle Zhang finally opened his eyes and sat beside the fire with a stiff face. Yun Chujio was secretly delighted. She had thought that it would be difficult to take the bait, but she did not expect it to be settled with alcohol. Martial Uncle Zhang did not eat much meat and did not speak. He only drank one cup after another. Yun Chujio was also obedient and did not ask anything. She poured the wine for Martial Uncle Zhang attentively. When Uncle Master Zhang's eyes were a little dazed, He Xinjiu began to pull back the net. "Uncle Master Zhang, I see that you have a dignified appearance and a strange skeleton. How did you enter this bitter cold cave? Were you framed?" Uncle Master Zhang drank the wine in his glass in one gulp and smiled bitterly. "Framed? I came in voluntarily." Yun Chujio was stunned. Voluntarily came in? Was she sick? Before Yun Chujio could continue asking, Uncle Master Zhang said, "Little girl, I know that you want to get information from me. Forget it, it's okay to tell you. You must think that I came to this bitter cold cave voluntarily because I'm sick, right?" Yun Chujio laughed dryly. "That's not the case. You must have a reason for doing so." "You sure know how to talk." "That's right. I have a reason that I must come here. One look and I can tell that you're a new disciple who just joined the sect. No wonder you don't know me. I am the direct disciple of the sect master. I was once a famous figure in the Nameless Sword sect. All the disciples of the same generation, who doesn't have to respectfully address me as senior brother when they see me? Zhang Li." When he said this, Zhang Li's face revealed a hint of disappointment. Yun Chujio's heart moved. The direct disciple of old man Ouyang? If nothing unexpected had happened, this Zhang Li was originally groomed as the next sect master. Why did he voluntarily come to this bitter cold cave? Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks, she had never heard of such a person. Looking at how depressed he was, he must have experienced some kind of change. While Yun Chujio was deep in thought, Zhang Li motioned for her to pour the wine. Yun Chujio quickly filled her glass again. Zhang Li drank the wine in the glass in one gulp and then raised his head to laugh. Yun Chujio shrunk her neck. It was over. This uncle had started to act crazy from drinking. Zhang Li laughed for a long while, but his eyes were a little red. He let out a long sigh. "I was so proud before, but now I'm so down and out. Little girl, you must remember one thing. Don't be too proud at any time. Otherwise you will suffer one day." Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and didn't say anything. Because what could this guy say? She had always been very arrogant. Zhang Li didn't care whether Yun Chujio said anything or not. He finally said something that he didn't want to talk about. 5 years ago, Zhang Li could be said to be very famous in the Nameless Sword sect. Whether it was his swordsmanship or his spiritual power cultivation, he was one of the best among his peers. However, he was also quite conceited. When he went out to the sect for a trial because of his willfulness, he killed 5 of his fellow disciples. Only he and Wan Qingba escaped. Those 5 disciples were the personal disciples of the elders in the sect. Although Master Ouyang tried his best to protect Zhang Li was still demoted to an outer disciple. Master Ouyang's original intention was to find a reason to turn Zhang Li back into an inner disciple after a period of time, and then turn him back into a true disciple. Who would have thought that Zhang Li had always been proud and arrogant? He blamed himself and had to bear the ridicule and complaints of the crowd. Soon he began to drown his sorrows with alcohol. What was worse was that when he was practicing his sword after drinking, he actually went mad and almost killed Wan Qingba, who was trying to comfort him. This time, even Master Ouyang lost his patience with him and began to ignore him, leaving him to fend for himself. Chapter 38:16 Was she really possessed? The discipline hall was afraid that he would act up again and hurt others, so they locked him up in the bitter cold cave. Later, although his condition had improved, he did not want to go out and face the cold stares of others anymore. Therefore, every time he went out to buy some necessities after the deadline, he would continue to return to the bitter cold cave. I deserve all these punishments. I deserve it. If it weren't for me, they wouldn't have lost their lives. I've let them down. I once thought of using my life to pay for it, but I still haven't caught those murderers. I can't accept this. But ever since the incident, how could the sect let me leave the sect? Not to mention carrying out the mission. Only by suffering in this bitter and cold cave can I feel better. Alright, now that you know, do you think that I deserve to die for my sins? I also think that I deserve death. After Zhang Li finished speaking, he snatched the wine gourd from Yun Chujia's hand and continued drinking. Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes. Wasn't Wan Qingba Elder Wan's son and Wan Pengcheng's uncle? There couldn't be another reason behind this, right? How could it be so coincidental that only Zhang Li and Wan Qingba escaped? Furthermore, why would Zhang Li go crazy from drinking? Why did he coincidentally want to kill Wan Qingba? Yun Chujio did not stop Zhang Li from crying while drinking. Sometimes, suppressing one's emotions might not be a good thing. It would be better to vent it out. The next day, after Zhang Li sobered up, he felt a little uncomfortable. However, Yun Chujio said with a smile, "Martial Uncle Zhang, we can be considered friends who have drunk before. Please don't be so distant from me in the future." Zhang Li, this little girl most likely did not study hard. Was this how friends were used? Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks, Martial Uncle Zhang. I've always heard people say that someone has gone mad or something like that. Can you tell me what it is like to go mad? I'm really curious. Yun Chujio had already seen Zhang Li's most embarrassing side, so she did not feel any psychological burden. He smiled bitterly. Why are you so curious about this? Qi deviation can be divided into two types. One is when the qi and blood flow is reversed, the meridians are damaged, the light ones have their spiritual power damaged, and the heavy ones vomit blood and die. The other type is when the body does not have any substantial damage, but when the spiritual sense is in disorder and negative emotions such as resentment and murderous aura take the upper hand, the person will become abnormal, and even the person closest to him will be killed. I am the second type. Yun Chujio's face stiffened. Wasn't she very similar to the second type? However, she did not seem to be that serious. She could still rely on her will to control it. Could it be that she had really gone mad? Zhang Li saw that Yun Chujio's expression was not very good and thought that she was scared. He smiled bitterly and said, "I said, why are you asking these questions? You must be scared now. You and I have known each other for a while. As an elder, I will give you a few words of advice. As an outer sect disciple, why do you have to have a conflict with Manager Li's son? Isn't it asking for trouble? When the time is up, go out and cultivate properly. Don't stir up trouble anymore." Yun Chujio had something on her mind, so she vaguely agreed. Zhang Li saw that his mind was elsewhere, so he did not say much and continued to meditate and cultivate. Yun Chujio frowned. She remembered that Zhang Li had said before that after he had gone mad, he had improved after staying in the bitter cold cave for a period of time. After she entered the bitter cold cave, she also felt that the last trace of bloodlust had dissipated. Could it be that she had really gone mad? Was it really because of the haunted house? Chapter 38:17 The enemy of an enemy is a friend. Yun Chujio rubbed her chin and wondered why the haunted house could cause one to go berserk. Logically speaking, the root of the berserk state was to magnify the negative emotions in one's heart, just like how the Gui Chao made her become a living dead. Then how did the haunted house do it? Moreover, ever since she was tortured by the Gui Chao, she could be considered immune to all poisons. How could she still fall for it? Yun Chujio had a lot on her mind, so she was not in the mood to think about the Great Void Soul Mending Formation. Besides, Zhang Li was here, so she could not set up the formation. What she wanted to do the most now was to return to the haunted house and find out the root of the problem. Then she would completely solve the issue of killing intent. Otherwise, it would be a hidden danger sooner or later. However, how could she get out as soon as possible? Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and finally, her gaze fell on Zhang Li. As the successor of the next sect master, Zhang Li was naturally envied by others. Moreover, the 5 who died were the direct disciples of the elders. This move could be said to kill many birds with one stone. It was definitely a conspiracy. Perhaps Elder Wan's hand was involved in this. The enemy of the enemy was a friend. Although Zhang Li was now depressed and unable to achieve anything, he was once the direct disciple of old man Ouyang. If he used it well, he could also be a help. Thus, this fellow squeezed out a few crocodile tears and sighed. Martial Uncle Zhang, I understand your feelings very well. To be honest, I've had similar experiences with you. Zhang Li was stunned. What did you say? You've had the same experience as me? That's right. I'm not from the towering sky continent, but from the immortal essence continent. Back then, I was also very proud of myself in the sect. It was just that I was envied by others and then set up a vicious scheme for me. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks, basically it was similar to what you went through. When I went out on a mission, a disciple who was usually good to me kept encouraging me, intentionally or unintentionally making me make the wrong decision. Coincidentally, we were ambushed. In the end, only me and the disciple who encouraged me returned to the sect. At that time, I was just like you, Martial Uncle. I simply felt that living was suffering and I wished I could die. Fortunately, my master helped me to find out the truth in the end. It turned out that all of this was done by the disciple who instigated me. Damn it, not only did I kill him later, I even killed his dog. Yun Chujio gnashed her teeth and said. At first, Zhang Li only listened with some curiosity. However, as he listened, he stood up. Even though his face was covered by a full beard, it could be seen that his expression was very ugly. Yun Chujio pursed her lips in her heart. Wasn't he that stupid? After a long while, Zhang Li stared at Yun Chujio and said hoarsely, What did you mean just now? You want to tell me that all of this was designed by Wan Qingba? Yun Chujio had an innocent look on her face. Martial Uncle Zhang, I'm only talking about my own experience. As for whether that Wan Qingba harmed you, you have to ask yourself. Zhang Li did not say anything for a long time. Yun Chujio stole a glance at his eyes and saw that there was suspicion, anger, and a hint of expectation in his eyes. Yun Chujio completely understood Zhang Li's thoughts. He wished that all of this was a conspiracy by Wan Qingba. This way, the guilt that tormented him at all times would turn into hatred, and he would be able to get rid of the situation where he was living a life worse than death. After almost 2 hours, Zhang Li said to Yun Chujio, Little girl, whether or not you have the intention to remind me, I will remember this favor. After I have investigated thoroughly, I will naturally show you something. Chapter 38:18. The eyes of the devil. Yun Chujio bared her little white teeth. Martial Uncle Zhang, let's not wait for the next day to repay me. You should repay me now. Zhang Li, after a moment of silence, Zhang Li said, How do you want me to repay you? Yun Chujio said with a smile, Martial Uncle Zhang, aren't you free to go out at any time? You carried my rabbit to Li Zhuangzi's courtyard for 2 nights in a row. As Yun Chujio spoke, she summoned the Meng Yanshou. In order not to be afraid of being exposed, this fellow had finally replaced the shell of the Meng Yanshou with the flowing light windblade rabbit that was commonly seen in the sky-high continent. However, this flowing light windblade rabbit was also the lowest level spirit beast in the sky-high continent, especially in the northern continent. Basically, it was used to stew meat. Therefore, when Zhang Li heard Yun Chujio's words and saw the Meng Yanshou on the ground, he was completely dumbfounded. What kind of request was this? Although Li Zhuangzi was an inner sect disciple, based on Zhang Li's cultivation level, it was not difficult for him to walk around his courtyard at night. However, what was the little girl's motive for doing this? Zhang Li saw that Yun Chujio's expression was very serious. He thought to himself, no matter what her motive was, helping her once would be considered returning a favor. It was also possible. Therefore Zhang Li agreed. That afternoon Zhang Li left Bitter Cold Cave, while He Xingjiu began to bitterly build the wall. This fellow was building the wall while muttering, There's a famous saying that says that it's easier to break the wall than to build it. It's true. Buttface rolled his eyes and asked in puzzlement, Little fairy, which famous person said this? Me? Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks Buttface, alright you win. That night, Zhang Li carried the nightmare beast and walked around Li Zhuangzi's courtyard. He took out the so-called special die that Yun Chujio gave him and wrote a big kiln word on the ground. Of course, when he wrote it, he deliberately wrote it with his left hand to avoid being recognized by others. After everything was done, Zhang Li quietly left Li Zhuangzi's courtyard. Not long after he walked out, he heard a terrified scream coming from inside the house. He frowned and quickly left. Inside the house, Li Zhuangzi was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. He had an extremely terrifying nightmare. He actually dreamed of a devil covered in blood warning him to quickly release Yun Chujio. Moreover, he was not allowed to tell anyone about this matter, or else a great disaster would befall him. Li Zhuangzi wiped the cold sweat off his head. He comforted himself that he must have been daydreaming. It was just a dream, nothing much. However, the next morning when he saw the situation in the courtyard, he was so frightened that he immediately sat on the ground. He saw a large kiln word on the ground. This was not much. The main thing was that the kiln word was filled with the corpses of spirit ants. Under the contrast of the red kiln word, it was particularly terrifying. Li Zhuangzi finally stood up. Could it be that someone had set him up? However, even if the word kiln was man-made, how could he explain the nightmare? No one had the ability to make him have nightmares, right? Could the warning in the dream be true? If he did not release Yun Chujio, would there really be a big disaster? Li Zhuangzi recalled hearing that when Yun Chujio was wronged last time, Shiheichi of the discipline hall had blood oozing out of his ears. Could it be that Yun Chujio was really that evil? The more Li Zhuangzi thought about it, the more scared he became. Somehow, he remembered the murderous look in Yun Chujio's eyes before she left. It was actually the same look as the demon in his dream. Chapter 38-19 Ghost Hunting. Li Zhuangzi took a while to recover before removing the spirit ant corpses and the red marks on the ground. He consoled himself that it must be a coincidence. However, in the middle of the night the next day, despite his efforts to widen his eyes, he fell asleep in the end and dreamed of the demon again. This time, the demon ate Manager Li right in front of him. Li Zhuangzi was so scared that he cried out repeatedly. He stayed in the house shivering until dawn. When he opened the door and saw a large amount of blood in the yard, he fainted from fright. After Li Zhuangzi woke up, he ran to the discipline hall without caring about anything else. Manager Song, I withdraw the charges against Yun Chujio. You let her out. Manager Song looked at the pale Li Zhuangzi with a dumbfounded face. Is this guy sick? Previously he wanted to severely punish Yun Chujio. Why did he come here to release Yun Chujio now? Li Zhuangzi saw that Manager Song didn't say anything and repeated his request. He almost knelt down before Manager Song. Manager Song couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. What on earth was going on? However, since the plaintiff withdrew the complaint, and it was only a grudge between the two of them, he naturally wouldn't stop it. He immediately ordered someone to release Yun Chujio from the bitter cold cave. After Yun Chujio came out of the bitter cold cave, she strolled towards her own courtyard. On the way, she met Zhang Li. Zhang Li returned the nightmare beast to Yun Chujio and left without saying anything. It was obvious that he did not intend to have a deep relationship with Yun Chujio. However, Yun Chujio did not seem to care about Meng Yanshou. Yun Chujio shrugged her shoulders indifferently. She had the bait in her hand, so she was not afraid that this Zhang Li would not take the bait in the future. It was better to let him hit the wall first. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. When Yun Chujio returned to the haunted house, Meng Yanshou kept asking for credit. Yun Chujio threw him a few scripts and he stopped immediately. Yun Chujio in the murder house inside and outside a check, but did not find any unusual places. Yun Chujio finally made up her mind not to sleep at night. She wanted to see what the hell was playing at. Therefore at night, Yun Chujio sat on the stone bench in the yard with her eyes wide open. Buttface was trembling as he held Yun Chujio's leg with his claws and refused to let go. Little fairy, I'm so scared. I'm scared to death. Put the baby into the spirit beast bag. The cat cub is brave. Let it out. Yun Chujio glanced at Buttface. She felt that his acting was more exaggerated. She did not believe that Buttface was really afraid of ghosts. However, it was fine to let the kitten out. It was a good opportunity to try it out. Therefore Yun Chujio let the kitten out. The kitten hated Buttface to death. This damn Qiongqi. It was fine if she suffered, but she had to drag it down with her. It was really a bad thing. Buttface saw a flash of hatred in the kitten's eyes. It wagged its tail proudly. Although this kitten was hateful, its abilities were not bad. It was safer with it around. Since it was the beginning of the moon in the sky was only a thin crescent. The courtyard was very dark, adding to the terrifying atmosphere. Dog 2 said with a trembling voice, Little fairy, don't you have the luminous pearl? Quick, take it out." The kitten said snappily, "Are you stupid? If it were as bright as day, would that thing appear?" Both of them were arguing with their spiritual senses, so it was very quiet in the courtyard. Just then there was a knock on the courtyard door. Chapter 38 Playing Tricks. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking on the door was exceptionally clear in the silent night. Buttface was so scared that he was trembling. Ghost, the ghost is here. It scared me to death." The kitten looked at Buttface with disdain. "Useless thing. What's there to be afraid of? What can it do to us?" Although the kitten said so, it was still uncertain. After all, it had seen with its own eyes that Yun Chujio had really gone mad. It was impossible for it to say that this house was not strange at all. It secretly raised its head to look at Yun Chujio. It thought that Yun Chujio must be terrified too. It did not expect to see the corner of Yun Chujio's mouth slightly curled up. Not only was she not afraid at all, but she was eager to give it a try? Although the kitten was unwilling to admit it, it could not help but admire Yun Chujio's courage. The stupid girl was too bold. She was not afraid at all? Just as the kitten was thinking, it felt a gust of cold wind beside it. It realized that Yun Chujio had already jumped to the door and suddenly opened the door. Although Buttface was shivering and holding onto the kitten's tail, its eyes were wide open. It curiously looked at the door. However, at the next moment, Buttface suddenly rushed to the door and bit at the person who was imprisoned by Yun Chujio. "Damn it! I told you to pretend to be a ghost to scare the baby. They'll bite you to death. Damn it, it's because you pretended to be a ghost that the baby's reputation will be ruined. They'll bite you to death. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site." Thanks. The kitten narrowed his eyes. Someone was pretending to be a ghost to scare people? However, what was going on with the little girl? Yun Chujio looked coldly at the ghost who had been bitten by Dog 2 and was crying like a ghost. She was wearing a white robe and a red cloth that looked like a tongue in her mouth. Her face was also pale because of some unknown dye. If an ordinary person saw this horrifying look at night, they would probably be scared to death. Unfortunately, this was all left over from her play. She was not creative. "Junior sister Yun, spare me. Spare me. I was forced to do this. I had no choice." The ghost's face was washed by tears and sweat. In addition to his voice, Yun Chujio recognized his identity. It was the handyman Jiarini from the Sword Hall who encouraged her to go to the second floor to accept the mission. Yun Chujio raised her eyebrows. "Forced by someone? Then tell me who forced you? And how?" Jiarini said with snot and tears in his eyes. "Junior sister Yun, yes, it was senior brother Luo and senior brother Yu who asked me to do it. If I didn't do it, he would kick me out of the Sword Hall. You also know that the servants in the Sword Hall are treated better than those in other places. I have no choice. Senior brother Luo and senior brother Yu?" Luo Hai and Yu Bo. Yes, it's the two of them. Because they are on good terms with Elder Wan's grandson, Wan Pengcheng, they are the best among the outer disciples of the lower house, not to mention a little servant like me. I really have no choice. A trace of coldness flashed in Yun Chujio's eyes. It was not the first time that these two scumbags had troubled her. They were really courting death. Jiarini saw the coldness in Yun Chujio's eyes and shivered in fear. He had come once in the middle of the night. After knocking on the door a few times, he did not expect to provoke Hei Xinjia's anger when she woke up. He was dumbfounded by Hei Xinjia's scolding. He could only leave with his tail between his legs. This time, when Yun Chujio just came out of the bitter cold cave, Luo Hai and Yu Bo found him and asked him to continue playing the ghost. In fact, he was not willing to come either. Everyone said that this courtyard was evil. What if he went mad? Chapter 38 Ghosts fear the wicked. Even though Yun Chujio's haunted house was far away from the residences of the other outer sect disciples, Jiao Renai's wailing just now still attracted the attention of some outer sect disciples. However, those people had nothing to do with it, and they were afraid of the evil ways of the haunted house, so they naturally would not come over to check. Seeing that Yun Chujio did not speak for a long time, Jiao Renai could not figure out what Yun Chujio meant. Just as he was about to beg for mercy again, Yun Chujio kicked him into the courtyard. Junior sister Yun, what do you want to do? Jiaorini asked in fear. It's very simple. From now on you will stay in my courtyard every night. Anyway, I have a lot of empty rooms here. Don't you like to pretend to be a ghost? There are a lot of ghosts in my courtyard. You can cultivate a good relationship with them, Yun Chujio said faintly. Jiaorini was instantly dumbfounded when he heard that. It was fine if he pretended to be a ghost outside the door, but this courtyard was a famous haunted house. If he lived here every night, wouldn't he be possessed by the devil? Just as he was about to refuse, Yun Chujio stuffed a pill into his mouth and said coldly, Jiaorini, the pill I gave you is 1,000 cuts and 10,000 burps. If you don't take the antidote within a month, you will try what 1,000 cuts and 10,000 burps is. Don't worry, this is my exclusive secret medicine. No one can find out that you are poisoned. If you don't believe me, you can try it. Jiaorini wanted to say more, but Yun Chujio stuffed his mouth with a rag and threw it into the yard. Then she brought Buttface and the kitten into the house. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Jiaorini's body was confined, and his mouth was stuffed with a rag. He could only lie in the yard bitterly. This was nothing. The main thing was that when he remembered that this was a haunted house, he felt a chill run down his spine. Dog 2 eagerly went to Yun Chujio's bedside. Little fairy, weren't you scared just now? Or did you know that someone was playing tricks from the beginning? The kitten also curiously pricked up its ears to listen. It had to say that Yun Chujio's performance just now had exceeded its expectations. This darn girl was really bold. Yun Chujio glanced at Dog 2 and said faintly, whether it's a ghost or a person, they are all the same in the end. What's there to be afraid of? Besides, that night I roared and the knocking stopped. It was obvious that I scared them away. How could it be a ghost? Buttface was stunned for a long time. After flattering him, he asked curiously, Little fairy, if you didn't guess that it was a person pretending to be a ghost, are you afraid? Yun Chujio raised her eyebrows slightly. What's there to be afraid of? No matter how scary a ghost is, there are still people who are scary. Stop talking nonsense and go to sleep. Buttface repeated a few words that Yun Chujio said, then, a bright light shone from his dog eyes. Little fairy, I finally understand. Isn't there a saying? Ghosts are afraid of evildoers. Evildoers like you are naturally not afraid of ghosts. Yun Chujio couldn't be bothered with this idiot. The so-called fear of ghosts was nothing more than the fear of unknown dangers. Just like when she was in the Yun family's ancestral tomb, she was not afraid of the so-called ghosts, but she was afraid that someone was playing tricks. The reason why she let Jiaorini stay here every night from now on was to verify whether the people who lived here would suffer from qi deviation. Yun Chujio's restriction on Jiaorini's spiritual power had a time limit. Therefore, the next morning Jiaorini scrambled out of the haunted house. He did not return to the sword hall. Instead, he ran to the nameless sword sect's medical center. Chapter 38-22 Sect Mission. Jiaorini had spent a lot of sect contribution points to get several disciples in the medical center to treat him. However, everyone said that other than some external injuries, his body was normal and there was nothing wrong with it. Jiaorini was about to cry. I'm really poisoned. How can there be nothing wrong? The disciples of the medical center looked at him as if he was a fool, and then no one paid him any attention. Jiaorini had no choice but to leave the medical center with a sad face. He had just arrived at the sword hall when he was stopped by Luo Hai. I heard that you were beaten up by that stinky girl last night. You're a piece of trash. Can't you even pretend to be a ghost? Jiaorini explained a few things in a submissive manner, but he subconsciously hid the poison and the fact that Yun Chujio asked him to stay there at night. Luo Hai kicked him and scolded him for being useless, then he turned around and left. Jiaorini's heart was filled with resentment. This Luo Hai and that Yu Bo had always bullied him. The last time he instigated Yun Chujio to accept the mission on the second floor of the Bounty Hall, he originally wanted to look for Martial Uncle Wan to take credit, but he let this Luo Hai and Yu Bo replace him. Later on, Yun Chujio came back alive. He heard that Martial Uncle Wan had taught them a lesson. They deserved it. In the evening, Jiaorini was very restless in his own residence. Should he go to the haunted house or not? At this moment he felt a faint pain in his dantian. His face could not help but turn pale. It seemed that what Yun Chujio said was true. The poison she had given him was really an exclusive secret medicine. In the end, Jiaorini still took his time to arrive at the haunted house. After all, compared to losing his life, Chi deviation was better. Moreover, it might not be true chi deviation. When Buttface saw Jiarini coming over, his dog eyes couldn't help but light up. He had finally found a fun toy. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks, Jiarini was really unlucky. He had been chased by Buttface in the yard for half a night. It was simply a life worse than death. For a few nights in a row, Jiarini stayed in Yun Chujia's yard. Other than being tortured by Buttface, there was nothing unusual. Yun Chujio deliberately let him compete with her in sword fights, but she did not find anything unusual. She also did not feel the sudden killing intent. What was going on? If an ordinary person had such worries, they would probably not be able to eat or sleep well. However, Hei Shinjio had always been ambitious. After pondering for a few days and seeing that there was no progress, she threw it to the back of her mind. On this day, Hei Shinjio was cultivating in her room. Her identity jade tablet started to tremble. After she used her spiritual sense to probe, she found that it was a message from the Bounty Hall, asking all the outer sect disciples to go to the Bounty Hall to receive sect missions. Yun Chujio could not help but twitch her lips. The Nameless Sword sect was really smart. Although the outer and inner sect disciples could receive the sect's resources on time, there was one thing that was really annoying, which was that they had to do the sect's mission every once in a while, and they could not refuse it. If they completed it, there would be a corresponding reward. If they failed, they would be punished, and in severe cases they would be demoted to odd jobs. Therefore, all the sect disciples did their best when carrying out the sect's mission. This was also why many disciples were willing to become disciples of the Sword Forging Hall. This was because the mission of the Sword Forging Hall was more than half of that of an ordinary outer sect disciple, so it was naturally less risky. Yun Chujio grumbled in her heart as she slowly walked towards the Bounty Hall. There were so many outer sect disciples anyway, so they could not complete the mission in such a short time. It did not matter whether it was earlier or later. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.